Give him my best, please.
Audio test, 1, 2, 3. Test, test.
Test 1, 2, 3, 4.
All right.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to this meeting. Oh, I thought it was. The green light's on. Closer. Thank you. Not used to sitting in this chair.
Hold on, it doesn't sound like it's on.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to start this meeting of the Pima County Board of Supervisors. And if we could have a roll call to establish quorum, please, Ms. Manriquez.
Supervisor Allen. Supervisor Christie.
Here.
Supervisor Grijalva. Here. Supervisor Hines. Chair Scott.
Here.
Let the record show Supervisors Allen and Hines are not present. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. We're going to move now to the Pledge of Allegiance, which is going to be led by Mr. Mr. Juan Quiroz, because Mr. Starks is unable to be with us. Mr. Quiroz is a communications specialist with Pima County.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Quiroz, did you want to tell us anything about what you're currently working on our behalfs?
Yes, we're here to present a check from the Strat Bakery to Friends of PAC based on a very successful campaign we did together.
Fantastic. We will look forward to that. And we are moving on now to the land acknowledgement statement, which today will be offered by Reverend D. Grady Scott, representing the 2025 MLK Day celebration.
On behalf of Pima County residents, we honor the tribal nations who have served as caretakers of this land from time immemorial and respectfully acknowledge the ancestral homelands of the Tohono O'odham Nation and the multi-millennial presence of the Pasquayaki tribe within Pima County. Consistent with Pima County's commitment to diversity and inclusion, we strive toward building equal partner relationships with Arizona's tribal nations. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Scott. Anything you would like to share with the community about yesterday's celebration at Reed Park?
On behalf of the Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Committee for 2025, I want to thank everyone, Pima County residents and Pima County Board of Supervisors, for your support of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday and the weekend. We had a great turnout yesterday, and we want to thank all of Tucson for coming together to show their appreciation for the life and the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Scott. We'll move on now to Pause for Pause.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kaylee Murdoch. I'm the Public Information Officer at Pima Animal Care Center. I brought a double helping of cute today. These little guys are pretty new to us. They just came in last week as strays. They were actually part of a litter of 10. So almost all of them have been adopted. These are the last couple, so they're still looking. Everybody on that? Two little ladies, so they'd love to meet you. Like all of our dogs in our shelter today, we have almost 500. They are free to adopt, so all dogs and puppies currently free to adopt at PAC, and of course they come spayed and neutered, microchipped, vaccinated, all the good stuff. One of our biggest needs at PAC today is for medical fosters, folks who can take care of pets that have medical needs. These guys, luckily, are really healthy and they're great, ready to go home. But not every pet who comes into PAC is so lucky. One of the things we're seeing most right now is distemper, which, as many know, is a really serious disease and is completely preventable with vaccines. So one of the biggest things to remember is that your pets need that yearly vaccine to keep them safe, to keep them healthy, just like these guys. And if you can help any of those guys recover, they are not contagious to other vaccinated dogs. And we also have many cats who need fosters as well. So we'd love to see you down at PAC, 4000 North Silver Bell Road. We're open 12 to 7 today, and we'd love to help you find your new best friend. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, we will now turn to our clerk, Ms. Manriquez, for agenda adjustments.
On the regular agenda, page 7, item 31, under Development Services. This is a hearing-specific plan rezoning, P24SP00005. This item will be heard after call to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Manriquez. I am really delighted that in my first meeting as the chair of this board, that I get to introduce this next item, which as the brainchild of our county administrator and her team, the recognition of We Are GEMS quarterly recipients. This is our employee recognition program, and these employees have been selected for the quarterly recognition by their department heads or in some cases the deputy county administrators and yourself, correct? All right. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Lesher. Please.
Good morning, and brainchild of all of our departments was what is coming up next. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to pause for a moment and really acknowledge some of our employees who have gone above and beyond. We are very, very proud of what the employees of Pima County do for our residents every single day, but periodically we have those individuals who have really gone above and beyond. They are nominated by fellow employees or by their directors and selected by a committee, and we will take some turns honoring different folks today. Now, I can't see. The first individual is Suzanne Fajardo. Suzanne, thank you very much. Suzanne is well known in the Finance and Risk Management Department for taking ownership of challenges and seeing them through to completion. Most recently, she was entrusted with significant projects concerning invoices and payments. She researched, prioritized, addressed these discrepancies that might have occurred to resolve these issues, and does it all with patience and professionalism. So please join me in thanking 19-year employee Suzanne Fajardo.
Get all these. Good morning. We get to celebrate today Health Department and Library. Yay. We got a good representation, so we need like really big shout outs. We'll start with Lauren Denauer. She's Public Health Program Manager 1 from the Health Department with 5 years of service. Lauren has played a key role at the Health Department to help keep the public safe. Some of the initiatives she has had a hand in, including spotlighting drowning prevention measures, working on new processes to trap disease-spreading mosquitoes, that's fascinating, and better informing the community about rabies prevention. Please give her a round of applause and recognize her. Thank you. Sure. All right, I'm going to stumble trying to get all these in the right order here. Here you go, Lauren. Yay. Next we have Chinyere Olumba. Chinyere is unable to be here today with me, but let's still recognize the work of our branch managers. Been there for 1.5 years as a librarian 3. As a branch manager of Woods Memorial Library, Chinyere Olumba fosters a warm and welcoming environment by making every member of her staff and the public feel included. Her creativity shines in the remarkable book displays she curates, which celebrate the diverse cultures and interests of the community she serves. All right, library. Next, we have Nicolas Ramirez, Environmental Health Supervisor from the Health Department with 26 and a half years of service. All right, Nicolas. Nicolas Ramirez has been a vital part of the health department's effort to minimize health concerns on everything from mosquitoes to rabies to extreme heat. Specifically, Nicholas worked to develop training and education for new processes in trapping mosquitoes and partner with a local lab to enhance training and identify whether an area contains mosquitoes infected with West Nile virus or Zika virus. So another round of applause. Great job. Thank you. Thank you. And lastly, we have Karina Pacheco. All right, Karina. Library Technical Assistant Supervisor with 3.5 years of service. Karina Pacheco does more than just supervise technical services at Quincy Douglas Library. Karina's strong mindset drives her to continually seek improvement. When she's not working on creating a collaborative workplace for her colleagues, she's providing one-on-one tutoring for a young patron, demonstrating her genuine care for literacy, growth, and individual success. Thank you very much, Karina. Appreciate you. All right, next. What did I do?
Good morning, Carmine DeBonis. We're going to recognize two staff people, one from Conservation Lands and Resources and the other from Parks and Recreation. So if Amy Belk could come and join me up here this morning. Hi, Amy. How are you?
Good.
Good. So Amy has a really cool job. She is the manager of the county's native plant nursery. So she gets to propagate and grow and care for native plants that go into county projects all over the region. And so quite an amazing task. We had some storm damage also recently to the native plant nursery. So those big monsoon busters that came through did some damage to our native plant nursery, our greenhouse, and the facility out there, and Amy was instrumental in getting us through the insurance claim process and getting those repairs conducted so that we're back up and running and sending beautiful plants out to beautiful projects all over Pima County. So 4-year veteran of Pima County, and thank you for everything you do, Amy.
Thank you.
And then next up is from Parks and Recreation. Oh, yeah, I guess I want to give you that, Amy. So thank you so much. Next up from Parks and Recreation is Jody Layton. Hi, Jody. Good morning. How are you? So Amy also has an awesome job, right? She gets to work with our aquatics program. So if you look across the county, all of our aquatics facilities, there's tremendous amount of programming that goes on out there. So, swim lessons are crucial in this community, making sure that our families and our children are safe. And more than 375 swim lessons she helps to coordinate, and just really stepped in as we had some vacancies in that program, picking up work herself, but also getting some new team members on board, bringing new supervisors in, managing the lifeguards. I mean, so if you think that, you've got a tough job, I mean, figure 150 teenagers, right, covering our pool programs. And so Jody does a fabulous job, 10 years with Pima County, so that's awesome. Pleasure. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. All right, the next one, I'm proud and honored to be able to do this. This is a young lady, I'm going to say, a grown woman who has been with this county since she was just little. Maybe not in this capacity, but many of you watched her grow up, and I am the honored elected official that gets to have her in my office, and we could not be prouder of the things that she does for us. She is amazing. She is an invaluable employee. And Luz, get up here. Luz Elias Atkins. She's worked for me now for 4 years. When I came in, she was in there and she was special to me when I walked through the door. I'm glad she decided to stick it out with me because I know there's a lot of people up here that would love to have her with them. And so with that, her family is also here today, and I think we would all just like to say hello and welcome them back, and on this really special occasion. Luz?
And are you? Yes. You summoned for the sheriff. There you go. You got it.
Joe LaPere, will you come up, please? Good morning, everybody. I'm Lieutenant Brett Burnson. I work with Joe in the Foothills District, the north side of Tucson. I was motivated to nominate Joe for this award because he covered for the Tucson Mountain District for his public safety specialist duties for 12 weeks. That's a big ask of somebody who has routines and, has to. Each of our districts has their own particular specialty and things that they're required to do. And when we asked him if he would do that, he said yes immediately. And that made me think about how he says yes to everything immediately. I think that this award was really made for people like Joe because he's always courteous, he's always respectful, and his enthusiasm is contagious. We're very proud of you, Joe. Thank you.
How about one more round of applause to this great group of employees we're honoring today? Thank you. And now we're going to take 1 minute. Maybe could all of our recipients come stand kind of in the front? I know Randy's going to. Am I doing your job? It's not good. Okay. I'm not doing it. There you go. Thanks.
Quite a crap load.
I know, right? Sure. Absolutely. All right. Well, this is a wonderful meeting in that we not only had the opportunity to represent some of our outstanding employees, but we also get to recognize two folks who have been fixtures in Pima County for many years and who are retiring. So first of all, we're going to recognize Ms. Ellen Moulton, the Director of the Finance and Risk Management Team for 25 years of service to Pima County. Come on down, Ms. Moulton. And let's join, if the board could join the county administrator down here.
It's a budget. And I see lots of the staff here today too, and we'll be sure that we get everybody in a picture. I think Pima County has been in the business of running a hospital since 1864. You were not with it the entire time. I promise. But one of the things that occurred in 2004 when we first leased the hospital to university physicians, I think at the time, a series of initials that occurred. We gained Ellen in that mix. Rather than staying as the CFO of the hospital, which she'd been doing for many years, she came on over to central finance. And in her time with the department, she has had a variety of roles. Consistently, I think the biggest role is to say no. Was that a fair assessment
Yes,
from my
that
book?
is
That's a fair assessment. We don't have the money. We don't have the money. I hear it's going to be in my mind forever, I think. But there was also a time when we needed to start a new department of analytics and data governance out of whole cloth, if you will, and to really make sure that a lot of departments were pulling together and talking, and able not only for departments, but the public to open up our website and see any little tiny piece of our budget or what's going on to ensure that we have complete transparency. Ellen ran all of that. And then when her sister from another mother, Michelle Campaign, retired, we brought Ellen back as our director, and that is where she has served for many, many years. Ellen's family is here today, people who are, I think, the only people in the room thrilled that you are retiring. But we will, they're there waving and sending, oh, look at their granddaughters. They're adorable. So please join me in thanking Ellen Moulton for her extraordinary service to Pima County.
Thank you, Jan. When I was initially hired at Pima, at Keno at the turn of the century, I never expected to be here 25 years. The people that I have met during this journey have just been amazing. They have changed my life in a lot of ways, and I hope I have impacted theirs in a positive way as well. I'm trying not to do this. Jan, thank you. It has been a privilege working for you these last several years. To the finance and risk management staff, you guys are simply the best. I don't have the words to express how grateful I am for all of your hard work and your innovative solutions and your just get it done attitude. Thank you so much. You have made this job easier than I could ever imagine. And to my family, you make it all worthwhile. And I look forward to spending the next 30 years with you as its sole focus. Thank you.
Tom, can you and the family want to come up for a second? Thank you. Uno más. Yeah. Sharon's there. She's shaking her head at me already. Sharon, get up here. Yeah. How many years you're retiring now? 41 years with Pima County. Look at this woman. She was 12, I think. Okay. Sharon is with the IT department, but Sharon has had the extraordinary job of training people and helping people understand how to use the systems that IT is providing to us. Thank you, Javier, our director, coming on up. There was a time, some of you may remember Hank Gatha, who was a deputy county administrator a while back, and Sharon would literally come in the room and look around and see me and see Hank and say, if you guys understand it, I can make anybody in the county understand it. So as someone who has been your baseline for so many years, we thank you. I can't imagine what we're going to do without you. So thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you. When I started with the county and IT a long time ago, there were no personal computers and there was no internet. What I did have was this really awesome IBM electronic typewriter that had built-in memory. But a lot of things have changed, and what hasn't changed are what I look for in people that got me this far. And those are people that think the same as me, that work hard together, resolve issues together, push each other along together, provide the greatest customer service together. But what's the best thing is that we laugh together. So just one thing I would tell you guys to take away is be nice to people, because there's going to be somebody out there that's going to push you to your goal, and you're going to need them. So thank you, everybody, for letting me get here.
Thank you, Sharon. And we'll snooch right there, and we're, yeah, I know. We're gonna get
Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was a combination of item 7 on the regular agenda and item number 1 on the addendum. We're now going to move to item number 2 on the agenda, presentation of a proclamation to Sandra Franco and Isabel Franco, La Estrella Bakery, proclaiming the day of Tuesday, January 21, 2025, to be La Estrella Bakery Appreciation Day in Pima County. I will move the item. Second. Moved and seconded by Supervisor Christie, and I believe that former chair, Supervisor Grijalba, see, I'm having to learn new things, is going to present the proclamation.
No, I'm happy to. I think we're all going to go down here, though, right? Okay.
Sure.
Great. And it was addendum.
Did I say agenda?
You said agenda. That's okay. I mean, it's your turn. Mom's here. Good. Your mama's here. Seriously. Okay. So I'm honored to read this proclamation to Estrella. Whereas the Spanish campaign for Pima Animal Care Center aims to increase awareness, education, and community involvement in the animal welfare among the Spanish-speaking residents of Pima County. And whereas this campaign is funded by Friends of PAC, whose support has been crucial in ensuring all members of the community have access to culturally relevant resources and information about animal care. Whereas La Estrella Bakery has been a dedicated supporter and partner with PAC, and whereas small businesses play a crucial role in creating positive changes within our community by fostering local economic growth, providing employment opportunities, and supporting community initiatives. And whereas through their generous contributions and unwavering support, La Estrella Bakery has significantly impacted the Spanish-speaking community by partnering with PAC to promote the well-being of and humane treatment of animals. And whereas La Estrella Bakery has actively participated in outreach events, donated resources, and used their influence to encourage community engagement and support for the campaign, improving PAC's ability to serve and protect animals in our community. And whereas La Estrella Bakery has implemented a creative and impactful fundraising campaign for Friends of PAC by selling these little bone-shaped cookies. They are the cutest things ever. I've purchased many. Successful, raising thousands of dollars to support animal welfare initiatives. Now therefore be it resolved that the Pima County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaims Tuesday, January 21st to be La Estrella Bakery Appreciation Day in Pima County in recognition of their outstanding support and partnership and contributions to the Spanish campaign for PAC, and expresses its deepest gratitude for their dedication to the people and pets of Pima County, passed and adopted this 21st day of January 2025. Muchas gracias.
Well, I just want to acknowledge the tremendous impact that La Estrella has made, for this campaign. They have raised the bar really, really high for the next business partner. This is the second one. First one was Güero Canelo. You may remember that. We're not going to unveil the next one yet because their feet legs may be shaking because this guy did a tremendous, tremendous job. So congratulations, and thank you for letting us work with you on this.
It was an honor. Thank you to the Tucson community for supporting and contributing to this cause. It was a very amazing experience for us. So we love you, Tucson.
So, and thank you. With that, we're going to let the jefa here, la señora Marta, present. This is amazing. They raised almost $12,000 for Friends of PAC over here. So we're going to let them present the check.
Can you tell everyone like how that idea came up and how they contributed all this?
So this was part of a marketing strategy. We wanted to raise awareness, and Marcia actually, it's her brainchild. She pitched the idea of creating a bone-shaped cookie. And then through social media, through our campaign, we invited people to come and spend money at La Estrella, buy the cookies, and that benefited Friends of PAC, which are the funders for this whole campaign. So it's important to also recognize their trust and funding, giving us the money to run this campaign. So this has been a really, really interesting and eye-opening experience, how small businesses can impact this movement. So with that, we'll let señora Marta, si quiere presentar. Well, there you go, guys. It's all yours. So come on over. Hi.
No? Okay. Oh, picture? Yeah. Thank you so much. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been an honor. I did by name. I'm like, figured out one of the witches right here. Thank you. Oh, those babies are so cute.
All right. Thank you all so much. We are now on to call to the public. And I'm going to read the rules and regulations that we have in place. Citizens attending the meeting shall observe rules of propriety, decorum, and good conduct. Any person making personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks, or who becomes boisterous while addressing the board, may be removed by the sergeant at arms, if directed by the chair. Such person may be barred from further audience before the board. Unauthorized remarks from the audience, stamping of feet, whistling, yells, and similar demonstrations shall not be permitted by the chair, who may direct offenders from the hearing room. We have a total of 4 speakers, so each person will have 3 minutes. And our first speaker is Colton Noble, to be followed by Shirley Ricard.
Board, thank you. My name's Colton Noble, and I was here about 2 months ago with respect to our conditional use permit, and I'm just coming to give you guys a status of where we're at. Not much has moved since the last 2 months we were here. We've had some back and forth with planning and development, but we still haven't figured out exactly what the right conditions and restrictions are. We started by proposing that Sharon Vineyards would ensure that the road leading up to our vineyard would be accessible by EMS, fire, and medical personnel, that we would add that to the conditions. And we also stipulated that there would be no parking on the street, so that nobody would park on the street. We would only park cars that we had. It took about a month to get some feedback that those conditions were unacceptable. And so we further proposed that Sharon Vineyards would not exceed the existing parking capacity of the property, and we sent those conditions onward. In the attachments, I've gone ahead and included a journal that I'm writing just to kind of document how this is, where we're at, and to document our journey on the conditional use permit process. So that gives you some more information. Also shows kind of what the parking conditions look like in the gravel parking lot, et cetera. What I want to also bring up is, since the last meeting, I've gone ahead and done some more research. I've determined that ARS 4-205.04, that's the Arizona State Farm Winery Law, permits us to sell wine on our premise, since we have a Series 13 farm winery license. And that's presumably we can sell wine on our premise in a tasting room or some sort of structure like that, right? And so my position is that the farm winery law basically allows us to have a tasting room or some kind of building there to sell wine in, just based on its own law. Pima County has already issued a conditional use permit for winery many years ago, and so that's already in place. And so combine that with the state statute, I don't really think that we need to add tasting room to our conditional use permit, but I wanted to just run that past the board. The third thing is that the Pima County Board of Supervisors approved our Series 13 farm winery license for Sharon Vineyards in 2021 again. Fourthly, Pima County has already issued a permit for our tasting room in 2016. And so the building department issued a permit for a new tasting room, the very thing we're trying to add to our conditional use permit now, in 2016. That structure was built in 2018. We work in it now. And the county has allowed the same use since at least 2017. So I'm just kind of wanting to let you guys know what the status is. We're going to continue working with the planning department to get acceptable conditions. We feel that we've done our best to really work back and forth and show, hey, we're willing to have acceptable conditions. It's difficult to place restrictions on number of people and number of cars that can go by, because they're difficult to enforce, one. But all we're asking to do is just to maintain the status quo and allow us to update our infrastructure. without adding any additional parking or adding anything additional that we're being asked to do. So no crazy hotels or parking lots or anything sort of like that. And it looks like my time's up. Thank you, supervisors.
All right, thank you, Mr. Noble. If you had anything that you weren't able to get to that you want the board to know, we have staff from the clerk's office right there, and you can pass on anything written. It'll be shared with all supervisors.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chair Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Noble.
And Chair Scott,
Yes, ma'am.
for the record, Supervisor Hines has joined today's meeting.
All right, thank you, Ms. Manriquez. Hello, Supervisor Hines. Ms. Required, please.
Good morning. Now that freedom of speech has been restored to our country, one can only imagine what that mandate will mean to would-be petty tyrants who wish to quell free speech through their petty rulings. Yesterday's agenda and activities are proving to present a rather glum turn of events for most of you, those who formally placed your hope in the continuation of the Democratic gravy train. Your coffers have run dry, very much like Zelensky. Thank you, Lord Jesus. You've lost your constant stream of seemingly endless cash, what you've used to fund your NGOs, divert to your pet projects, and with which you've lined your pockets from the myriad of kickbacks. Yes, the gravy train has dried up, thanks to our great commander-in-chief. So sad for all of you. Now that the flow of migrants has abruptly ceased, perhaps food stamps can return to their former status, when they could provide an amount which was sufficiently and actually meager to feed a family of 4, since we're no longer subsidizing those from Senegal, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. Perhaps we can feed our own, right? The reinstated Remain in Mexico policy will stem the unprecedented invasion of our southern border by illegal aliens and consequently the flow of Democratic voters, which unfortunately for you didn't help Kamala win the election against our President Trump. The mandate to end anchor babies, aka birthright citizenship, is one of the most overreaching and may have some quite profound implications, profoundly appreciated by the majority of American citizens. And just like anchor babies, our sanctuary city status, thankfully, will be no more. Is it women of childbearing age that we see crossing our border? On the contrary, military-age men with no wives or girlfriends in sight smacks of the true nature of the insurgents, a threatening force poised to attack on command. The children that we often see are victims of trafficking, just like James O'Keefe and his team at OMG have elucidated us with that entire story. Those uncles who they're meeting are the repeat offenders identified by Border Patrol agents, often sickeningly collecting multiple nieces and nephews every week and abundantly augmenting the child trafficking trade. Our true president is back following the election of 2020, which was stolen from him. He's going to come after all of you. You ratified certified elections despite the fact that you were schooled repeatedly ad nauseum on this topic by our champions. Tim Locks, Gisela Aaron, Ann Rose, Lori Moore, Ralph, Roger, Gary, myself, and a myriad of others. You glibly went about the course that you had plighted, certain that you'd never be called to task. And woe be to you. Your judgment day has come.
We're now going to call up Robert Royce, followed by Keith Van Heineken.
I'm Robert Royce. I've got a little different perspective on yesterday's inauguration. I tried to watch it. I got about 5 minutes in and realized I needed some help. So I reached for some Acapulco Gold pot that I grew last year. Allowed me to actually watch the whole thing. Who knew? A golden age for America. All you have to do is deport a couple million people, cut some more taxes for some rich people. What else is he going to do? Is fire civil service and hire some political cronies, and that constitutes a golden age. Who knew it would be so easy? 70 years of compounding federalist monopolism, accumulating on the backs of the American people, and it's like, gone. Donald Trump is president. Golden age is coming. This is actually an opportunity. One thing the Acapulco Gold made clear to me is that he's got like 2 or 3 seats in the House of Representatives. The majority that's going to be gone in 2 years. And we're looking at a 48% approval rating. Everybody's like 48%. I think Barack Obama started at 62. Donald Trump's 48 is going to be 38 within about 10 months when people realize that prices are going to keep going up. The national debt's going to continue to explode. There's no miracle. The only thing that's going to save us now is a Jeffersonian Congress, a Congress that understands the fundamentals of Jeffersonian economics, a president that understands the fundamentals of Jeffersonian economics. We got 2 years to work on the Congress, needs to start now. The matter of the presidency, I mean, if the Democrats are going to pick Gavin Newsom or another la-la liberal, we're in for a hard time. Does anyone here know what the original slogan of the Democratic Party was? How Mr. Jefferson ended 10 years of Federalist rule and initiated 28 years of Jeffersonian rule for our country? We shall keep the people on our side by keeping ourselves in the right. That was the policy of your party even before it was founded in the initial days. And that's the only thing that's going to get us off the hook here and now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Royce. Mr. Van Heinigen.
Yes. Good morning. My name is Keith Van Heinigen. I'm a quarter-century resident of Pima County. Times, they are changing. My mother was born in 42 in Oklahoma. She was raised in Alaska because my grandfather worked for the Army Corps of Engineers. He built the Alcan Highway for 15-odd years. My mom then became a secretary at the Pentagon. They were living in Virginia. She met my dad, a soldier, an Army security agency grunt. My grandfather's one, I say, was an engineer, but he was also a warrior for 40 years. On the other side was a NASA engineer, John Van Heinigen, a friend of Eisenhower. My great-grandfathers were a merchant marine from Holland who suffered at the hands of the British in the Boer Wars. His family slaughtered. He was imprisoned in Australia in an opal mine where he escaped and came to Cleveland. There's a lot of history in there. They're buried at Arlington, at Culpeper. They've seen the tragedy, as have I. My God, I'm in my 60s. How did that happen? The things I've seen in South and Central America would make your head spin. The tide has turned. Yes, it will be difficult. People will suffer. It's not our problem to solve all the problems. But my God, we can fix a lot of them. And as far as the world, Joe set it to burn. Let's hope that Trump and Putin can work, because so far, have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Van Heinigen. And Mr. Van Heinigen was our final speaker, so I will close call to the public and ask my colleagues if they want staff to follow up on any of the issues raised or to respond to a criticism.
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Christie.
Could the development service folks make sure that all areas are being discussed and covered that we heard today at call to the public from the winery owners? And if possible, maybe we could arrange a meeting with my staff, the winery folks, and developmental services, or at least some type of communication to see what we can do to resolve this matter so all issues and all predicaments are addressed and fully vetted. I would appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Christie. Anybody else? Supervisor Hines? Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were turning your mic on. All right. Well, as we noted during agenda adjustments, we are going to move to item number 31 on the regular agenda. This is a hearing on a specific plan rezoning, P24SP 0005 DMCI Enterprises LLC, West Valencia Road, specific plan rezoning. This is in District 5, so I will defer to Supervisor Grijalva.
Is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this project? If not, I'll go ahead and ask that we close the public hearing and approve, subject to standard and special conditions, this rezoning.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Supervisor Christie. Discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any members opposed? Item passes 4-0.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move back to regular order on the regular agenda. This is the Board of Supervisors sitting as other boards, the Flood Control District Board. This is a hearing on a code text amendment, ordinance number 2025. Administrator Lesher.
Thank you very much, Chair Scott. And both items 9 and 10 are related to subdivisions and the commercial development and our drainage improvements. I'd like to turn it over to Deputy County Administrator DeBonis to walk through the items. Thank you.
Thank you, County Administrator and Mr. Chair and members of the board. As indicated, this item is before you today for consideration. Item 9 is a hearing on a code text amendment. Essentially what it does is it allows for the Flood Control District to issue permits when they have received a statement from an engineer that says the drainage improvements that have been roughed in but not yet completed are sufficient to protect not only those structures that are being permitted, but also downstream properties. So typically what happens under the code as it currently exists is those drainage improvements have to be entirely completed and an engineer has to submit an as-built plan that reflects the final construction of those improvements. But what we know is that in certain instances, the rough grading is sufficient enough to allow for structures to be constructed, permits to be issued, structures to be constructed, and also protect the surrounding property. So that's what this change is here. It is a streamlining of process and allows for the development to continue progressing along. Also, already in place is our process for final acceptance of improvements and the release of those new built homes for sale to the public. So this is in tandem with that. It's at the discretion of the Flood Control District. The engineer submits the rough grading statement saying that things are sufficient to protect surrounding properties. Flood Control reviews it, will field investigate it, and make a determination if they agree and can issue permits simultaneous while the project is continued to be constructed. So that's what's before you on item number 9. If you approve that one, then item number 10 is a hearing relative to establishing the technical procedure to effectuate that code amendment if you should approve it. Happy to answer any other questions.
Mr. Chair?
Supervisor Christie.
What prompted this? What, like a Reader's Digest version, what was the situation prior to this item being placed before us? And what was the impetus in making the changes?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair and Supervisor Christie. We have regular interaction with the development industry. We have a variety of stakeholder forums. They bring topics into those meetings and ask for consideration for things that help to facilitate the development process. So this was an item that was identified by the Southern Arizona Home Builders. They had client members that were asking to receive building permits while drainage improvements were being completed. And because of our current ordinance, that was not able to be accomplished. Or what they had to do was go through an extended process to demonstrate that there would be no adverse impact. So this is through ongoing interaction and engagement with the industry and a concurrent agreement that this would be beneficial for the processing of development.
So just to summarize, Mr. Chair, there was a identifiable problem, quote unquote problem, prior to the implementation or the creation of this adjustment. And this is to address that problem. And you say it should streamline the entire process?
Mr. Chair, Supervisor Christie, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions from board members? And because this is a hearing, I just want to see if there's any member of the public who wants to address this item. All right. If that's the case, then I will move to close the public hearing and approve ordinance number 2025-FC1.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Supervisor Grijalva. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passes 4-0. And I will just say parenthetically, since this is my first meeting as the chair, it's perfectly fine to address me either as Mr. Chair, as both Supervisor Christie and Mr. DeBonis have, or you can address me the way that the previous two chairs have asked to be addressed, which is with the title and then my surname. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 10. This is a hearing, rulemaking enactment of Pima County Regional Flood Control Technical Procedure 111 and amendments to the Design Standards for Stormwater Detention and Retention Manual, ordinance number 2025-FC2. Administrator Lesher.
Thank you very much, Chair Scott. And I will again ask Mr. DeBonis to walk through some of the details of this rulemaking. Thank you.
Chair Scott, County Administrator, thank you. This item will adopt the technical procedure that relates to the code amendment that the board just approved. So we recommend approval of the rulemaking for technical procedure 111 flood control district.
Thank you. Any member of the public that wishes to address this item?
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Christie.
So, Mr. DeBonis, this is the same kind of situation that we had with the previous item. This was identified as a issue, and now it's going to basically serve as a conduit for what we just approved.
Chair Scott, Supervisor Christie, that's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. If there's nothing else from board members, I'll move to close the public hearing and approve ordinance number 2025-FC2.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Supervisor Grijalva. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ordinance passes 4-0. We'll move now to agenda item number 11, order and call for election, resolution number 2025-WCFD1. Administrator Lesher.
Thank you very much, Chair Scott. As you know, the Board of Supervisors can and does periodically create special taxing districts. This is one of those that the board's created about 4 years ago. This is a request, and I should describe the community facilities district are used so that the individuals residing within the community can pay for the critical infrastructure that might be needed in that area. And you sit as the board of those community facilities districts. This is a request by the community facilities district to hold an election to increase the tax rate in order to pay for that critical infrastructure. I'm looking at Mr. DeBona, seeing if there's anything else to add at this point. Thank you.
All right. Any questions from board members? If not, I will move that we approve resolution number 2025-WCFD1. Moved and seconded by Supervisor Grijalva. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes 4-0. We'll move then to approval of the consent calendar. Unless there are any board members that want to take an item separately, I will move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Supervisor Grijalva. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Consent calendar items pass 4-0. We'll move now to Board of Supervisors representative updates on boards, committees, and commissions, and any other municipalities. Any of my colleagues have anything to report?
Mr.
Supervisor Christie.
I just want to add to a very timely and horrifying situation that we're all experiencing and all watching, and that's the horrendous fires in the wildfires in the Los Angeles area. We recognize that our community, our region, our county, and its neighborhoods and its homeowners share the same vulnerability that just went through the Los Angeles area. And it's a matter of preparing. What is predictable is preventable has become kind of a buzzword now. And I just want to report to my colleagues and ask that they at least consider in their own districts the implementation of the FireWise certification program. We started this in the Mount Lemon Summerhaven community as a result of the numerous fires that devastated that area over the past couple of decades. And what it does basically is it assigns neighborhoods to work together to create an environment that inhibits and prevents and hopefully causes not to ever happen the devastating effects that we see on homes and communities in LA. It's a very rigorous certification process where you have to comply with clearing underbrush, making your home preventable and ready for any kind of, say, fallen embers or flame outs or anything of that nature, an escape plan. It basically, the last devastating fire we had on the mountain up there, you could see where the trail of the fire went, and when it reached Summerhaven, due to the FireWise program, it was a definite demarcation of how the fire avoided Summerhaven, and the loss of property and homes and other infrastructure was virtually nil. And it was an amazing thing. It was like a surgical incision that you could see where the FireWise program that was implemented prevented this devastation. It's gained such popularity and acceptance from the Summerhaven, which is really basically the gold bar standard of the FireWise program, that in our district we have the Green Valley community that has embraced it. I think we've got 8 or 10 HOAs already that have passed certification. They're as vulnerable in those areas as they are on Mount Lemon. Matter of fact, I would think it's safe to assume that our whole region is vulnerable to wildfires. And we've got to do a constant reminder to people that it could happen at any time under any circumstances, particularly when the red flag warnings go up, and we're certainly in line to be receiving those our office can provide the community as well as my colleagues any kind of contact information or general information for the Firewise program. I really, like all of us, was absolutely horrified to see the loss of property and life in one of the most iconic areas of Los Angeles. Not just one fire, but half a dozen or so, just conflagrations of epic proportions. We don't want that to happen in Pima County. It's happened here before in various neighborhoods. So if we worked as a region and instituted this Firewise program, I think the benefits and the protection and the readiness will absolutely be worthwhile. So I encourage my colleagues, I encourage the county's emergency management system to make accommodations to educate our community about the Firewise program and implement it. It's one major thing we can do to prevent the wildfire situation. And it's been successful, and it's being embraced by numerous communities throughout the region, and I certainly encourage participation by all of us. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Christie, thank you for your very timely comments and for citing the example of the Summerhaven community as a success of the Firewise program. I'd like to ask the county administrator if she could follow up with the other district offices, really the board as a whole, and let us know what we're already doing, consistent with Supervisor Christie's statements, and what more we might make all of our constituents aware of.
And Mr. Chairman, I could just quickly add one more thing. What we're also seeing and experiencing is the other double-edged sword of this whole process, and that is the insurance availability either being pulled completely from homeowners or the premiums being skyrocketing. Hopefully this is one area that might give some sort of relief when insurance companies see huge communities that have taken part of the Firewise program. Perhaps they'll be able to rate those communities a little bit less stringently than they are now. With your help, Supervisor Scott, we put the insurance issue on the legislative agenda for the state of Arizona. We've instructed our lobbyists. The Department of Insurance and Financial Institutions has created a subcommittee to study the insurance issue. They meet monthly. We're very fortunate to have Carmine DeBonis as our county representative, the only county that has an administrator on that committee. So there's a lot more involved in matters than just fire that meet the eye on this whole thing with Firewise, and I think this would be an avenue that could certainly be very productive in helping and giving relief for those without insurance, who can't find insurance, who are facing huge premiums, as well as protecting their own property and the property of others. So thank you again.
Thank you, Supervisor Christie. Any other reports from board members? If not, I will share with my colleagues that last week I took part in meetings of the County Supervisors Association in Phoenix that were centered around orientation for new supervisors. Our colleague from District 3, Supervisor Allen, was part of that orientation, as well as many supervisors around the state. Some of the counties, just like we did 4 years ago, have 3 new supervisors. Maricopa and Yavapai counties, for example, each have 3 new supervisors. Also participated during our monthly Board of Directors meeting on Thursday of last week in the first meeting of the Legislative Policy Committee. And one of the bills that we discussed was introduced by Senate President Peterson and would have some significant impacts on the conduct of elections within the state of Arizona. And I know that CSA staff is reaching out to county staff to get input from the counties because the association has not taken a position on that legislation at this point. All right, we will move then to update on county initiatives to address homelessness and public safety. Administrator Lesher.
Thank you very much, Chair Scott and members of the board. The director of our Office of Housing Opportunities and Homeless Solutions is here today, Ms. Jen Darlin. She'll walk through the year-end report and an update on all of the work of the county in this area. Ms. Darlin, thank you.
Thank you, County Administrator Lesher, Chair Scott, members of the board. For the purpose of this month's update is just a brief highlight of where we sort of left off in the calendar year of 2024. As the board may recall, the Office of Housing Opportunities and Homeless Solutions was established with 5 guiding priorities: to first conduct the inventory of existing county and partner programs, to second describe and illustrate the homeless response system and care coordination, to 3 develop county and public facing communication strategies to enable individuals to understand where and how to access services, and priorities 4 and 5 make up the basis of today's update for you all today. The update on the progress on priority number 4, which is to develop a strategic and continuous improvement plan with the goal of ensuring county programming is responsive, sustainable, and equitably distributed. As you will note, I added emphasis under responsive. County programming as operated under county programming presently as operated under the County Administrative Procedure 50.02, more commonly referred to as the Homeless Protocol, has taken up the largesse of the office focus and priorities in response to the high increase of street homelessness and people living in places not meant for human habitation. I want to assure that any of the updates that have been proposed or are under a review have not interrupted the county's consistent response while we're waiting for the updates to the policy to be reviewed and finalized, meaning the protocol continues as is. The updates are really just about refining and memorializing the existing and developing best practices and approaches that the staff have incorporated into their daily effort and making that part of a consistent strategy. At present, there is a draft under review with strategic development leadership, meaning we're going specifically to have it reviewed by the leadership of the Pima County Regional Flood Control District. That particular department has really the largest understanding and maintenance responsibility for the county, and so we're asking them to take the lead in taking the first initial review of the protocol revisions. Second to that, we continue to work with county IT and the Geographic Information System team for the development of a data system that can interface not only with the regional reporting tool, but also help us get a little bit better at tracking our data and tracking the rate at which homelessness is being, or encampment activities are being reported to the county, which departments are responsible for it, and where it is occurring pretty repeatedly, so we can develop some strategies to promptly intervene wherever possible. The next update is on the development of priority number 5, which is to develop a means of tracking the efficacy of county assistance programs and work with departments and partner agencies and governments to develop attainable measures of success. This is going to be about getting together with our county departments and their leadership to identify the programming and the partners specifically to see if we can identify shared metrics and data points for which we can all sort of monitor where the programming is occurring and the overall goals of those programs. Where do we have some system alignment between the departments and our efforts? Who are we partnering with, and how are we tracking success in that space? Next slide. Thank you. So for the period of December 1 through November 30 of 2024, we had just a little over 2,000 confirmed encampment reports for the entire region. Of those, about 15% of those fell within within Pima County, meaning the unincorporated space of the county. Less than 1% of that, or approximately 1% of that, were in other jurisdictions, being Oro Valley, Marana, Sahuarita, or the town of South Tucson. Want to be mindful to note that of those reports, of the 323 that were in unincorporated Pima County, of those are a subset of parcels of property that are either privately owned or are maintained by other federal or state agencies for which we do not have the jurisdictional authority to proceed to do any activities. However, we do still collect that data point as a report on their asset. And as previously communicated in prior updates, our public works teams, primarily, our Pima County Department of Transportation, Pima County Flood Control District, they have, through the course of their activities, identified the appropriate points of contact for any of the federal or state agencies to which they can liaise and notify them of reported encampments on their assets. Next slide, please. And just want to take any opportunity to end these updates on a high note. I want to, and one of which I cannot take personal credit. This is a credit to, again, the county departments and their partnership with their colleagues over at the City of Tucson in competing for some highly competitive grants that are offered by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The most recent, and so we're going to go in order as they were released. The first one is the Pathways to Removing Obstacles to Housing. Actually, I'm going in the opposite order. My apologies. Pathways to Removing Obstacles to Housing. That's $7 million over 5 years. This is for the purpose of increasing the opportunity of housing that's affordable in areas identified as opportunity zones, or high opportunity areas, rather. This is to increase this is to increase housing that's affordable in more higher income neighborhoods. This is for the county about $3 million over the course of the grant. This is to it will fund a transportation impact fee subsidy program. This will be for any development fees that could be waived or covered for development of affordable housing in unincorporated Pima County. And then $2 million in gap funding that will be released for development of affordable housing in high opportunity neighborhoods. The second grant is the PRICE grant, or the Preservation and Reinvestment Initiatives for Community Enhancement. That is $11.5 million. That's another $5 million, another 5-year grant opportunity to increase financial support for residents in mobile home or manufactured parks or communities. It is for also the rehabilitation and relocation of mobile homes, both in the county and in the city, and to provide some eviction prevention support for county residents who are leasing or renting mobile homes in mobile home parks. Again, both of these grant opportunities align with Board Policy E36.2, reducing generational poverty and improving individual and community wealth, more commonly referred to as a prosperity initiative. And to the credit, and these opportunities were successfully, or these grants were successfully competed for in partnership of the county's Development Services Department, Community Workforce Development, the county's Department of Transportation, Real Property, I believe, as well, and their counterparts over at the City of Tucson. And with that, I can pause for any questions.
Any questions or comments from board members? I'm sorry, I thought you were pushing your button.
Yes.
Go ahead, Supervisor Grijalva.
Well, I want to thank you for the presentation. I know that our office has had the opportunity to really dive deep into some of the departments and the supports that are happening out in the community. And I think helping all of us to better understand how the city has a role, the county has a role, flood control has a different role within the county, and law enforcement and the courts and all of those pieces. And so I think it would be very helpful for us to sort of create a grid or a guide to help understand, because I think that every elected official, when you have somebody who is unhoused in front of your business, in your neighborhood, a fire happens, something, everybody in that area gets, fingers pointed at them. And I just think it's very helpful for us to understand how we can better work together and where the separation of, the separation of the branches of government and how those have a play. Because I just think that so much, I heard about it this weekend. Well, you guys haven't done this. And I'm like trying to explain the difference between the city and the county, law enforcement, the courts, the county attorney's role, all of those pieces I think would be really helpful.
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Christie.
Do you foresee any impacts that the incoming administration in Washington with executive orders might have on, excuse me, on this whole subject that you're dealing with?
And Ms. Darling, before you respond, if you could also address the suggestions that Supervisor Grijalva made in her comments.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Scott. If I can, Supervisor Christie, and then I'll get to Vice Chair Grijalva's point. At present, executive orders, I'm not expecting any executive orders related to housing for homeless individuals. I don't foresee that now. What we are monitoring for, of course, is any changes or what they call public. I forget the exact term, but HUD often releases notices of any rule changes associated with McKinney-Vento Act aligned programming for housing for at-risk and homeless individuals. So we do monitor that to see if there are going to be any changes that come from that department under the new administration, and we'll be watching it fairly closely. Early indications, as previously shared with in the December update to the board, were there could be some changes to the participation requirements prior to housing. But again, all of that is speculative until we see firm published notices from the department itself. And then Vice Chair Grijalva, yes, absolutely believe that there is the importance to delineate the differences between who is responsible for what. The goal, as I'm sure you all can appreciate, is to get as many ducks as we can in a row with respect to the protocol, so that we can also work with the board offices to walk through some of those changes, some of the operational pivots, and better establish and solidify points of contact for you, for your staff, and for your constituents, so it can remove sort of the frustration that can exacerbate the circumstances and situations. As you touched on, it is often, we work in collaboration with our colleagues at the City of Tucson because we have assets in their law enforcement jurisdiction. And so we have to be mutually aligned wherever possible, wherever is practicable, on not only what we do to address, provide outreach, clean up and remediate, and also maintenance and surveillance of that site, but also working in partnership with their law enforcement leaders on strategies that can get when appropriate, right, when we have activities that are violating the rules. So yes, we will delineate that.
And the only other addition that I'd have, Chair Scott, is our NGOs, our nonprofits that are doing a lot of heavy lifting depending on different populations. I was reminded because Mr. Howe's here, and I'm like, okay, I remember that I need to also include our NGOs because they do so much in our community to serve different populations and provide different supports. So it's not so much I want to get away from like the finger pointing blame game kind of thing, but just to try to understand differences, because I'll hear people say things and I'm like, that has nothing to do with county restrictions, or it's a city ordinance, or that has nothing to do with the city, that's a county responsibility, and try for helping people sort of navigate that. And our offices, when we get calls to help us navigate that, I think will be very helpful. Thanks.
Thank you. Supervisor Christie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to reiterate, though, you feel confident that you're able to prepare and adjust should any rule changes from HUD or the administration come down. You feel confident that you're in a situation of monitoring them, that you can adjust accordingly in a timely fashion.
If I may, Chair Scott, thank you, and Supervisor Christie, just quick up, as we speak, we are reviewing the executive orders that were issued yesterday to begin a crosswalk with not only this, but all of our county programs to see where there's an impact and what we need to do, if anything, to begin to adjust to that. I'd also note on this side of it, with the housing opportunities, the state initiatives or the state propositions that passed are obviously critical. The board had asked for a report, and Mr. Brown finished up an evaluation from the county attorney on the propositions that were adopted by the voters, and that will be coming your way later today, that looks at particularly 312, which is what we need to do with property tax and those programs. So we will, of course, adhere to all the new rules, but you'll be getting an evaluation fairly soon from us as to what was the first tranche of EOs and what we're doing to line up.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from board members? If not, then I had some requests for additional information. And if there's anything that you can share today, Administrator Lesher or Ms. Darlin, that's great. But if this is information you need to compile, I'll certainly understand. In the cover memo that we had from Administrator Lesher to Ms. Darlin's report, you cited one of the main tasks for the office, which is developing a strategic and continuous improvement plan with the goal of ensuring county programming is responsive, sustainable, and equitably distributed. I would certainly appreciate it if the board could somehow be engaged with the development of that plan or at least get updates as it's being developed. Consistent with what you heard from Supervisor Grijalva, if you go further down Ms. Lesher's memo, she mentions 6 critical elements. And the 5th one says, unifying a vision for county programming where the county and other jurisdictional and community partners to support crisis intervention, navigate vulnerable at-risk or homeless individuals into programs to alleviate their housing crisis, including shelter, housing, treatment, or justice services. I'd really like to get some data on how we have had success or where we see further need for improvement in encouraging individuals who've been resistant to accepting those services to do so. And that is consistent also with one of the protocol procedures. I believe it's protocol procedure number 3, where there are various departments within the county that are called upon to intervene anytime an encampment is discovered. There are several departments that are cited: behavioral health, the Community and Workforce Development Department. Would definitely like to get some data, both anecdotal and statistical, on successes that we've had with the interventions of those departments. Similarly, Ms. Lesher cited in her memorandum a 6th critical element, efforts within the community, and this would be not only by the county, but by the city, by the NGOs that Supervisor Grijalva cited, that successfully stave off further increases in homelessness. Would like some examples that we can cite of those successes. Both Ms. Lesher and Ms. Darland said that one of the 3 key tasks for 2025, this is the 3rd one, is work with county health and human services departments on developing unified understanding and vision for how county programs and services should be leveraged for vulnerable, at-risk, or homeless individuals and employees. This might be aligned with some of my earlier requests, but would really like some more detail on how we are going to be approaching that 3rd key tasks. Appreciated you, Ms. Darland, in your report, and Ms. Lesher cited this in her cover memo, the extraordinary success of people in the community who have benefited from the assistance from the EELS office. Would like to get some more tangible examples of EELS interventions that we could build on and include in that strategic and continuous improvement plan. The 5th part of the protocol deals with efforts to discourage homeless individuals from returning to cleared encampments. Would like to get some data on how we have done in discouraging returns to areas that have been cleared. And then finally, Ms. Darland, in one of your previous reports, you gave us an estimate of additional shelter space that is needed throughout the county, and that would include within all incorporated jurisdictions, including the city. Would like to get some updates on steps that the county can take, either by ourselves or in partnership with the private and public sectors to increase the amount of shelter space. If there was anything that either of you wanted to say in response to those requests now, that would be great, but I understand there may be some additional work that needs to be done to report back to the board fully. Ms. Darland.
Yes, thank you, Chair Scott. So part of the activities related to the update and the protocol are to really get to the granular details of being about processes and systems for which we can pull out the data for which you're citing. That is one of the challenges right now, is that independent departments have their own independent system by which they're tracking some of these pieces. And to be absolutely candid with respect to what's being accepted and what's being denied is anecdotal, where, as I said, as I previously updated, 1 in 10 are accepting services and everyone else is declining. I don't have, so part of the goal, right, in establishing a central system and refining our protocol process is to really get specific about the types of data we want staff to be collecting when they're responding to an encampment on a county asset. The number of people, the basic demographics associated with those who they are encountering. Are we encountering people who are chronically homeless, families, individuals? Are we encountering people who have significant barriers to housing, such as, number of people in the household, pets, any active felonies, et cetera. So to that point, all of the systems are aligning to start to systems, I should say, all of the stars are aligning to start to develop these systems by which we can pull in not what has been anecdotal data to date, but really start to get some data that starts to really illustrate the complexity of the crisis. Because at this point, it's all been anecdotal. We just haven't been able to build the ship as fast as we are setting to sail.
And just to follow up, Ms. Darland, I'm assuming everything that you just said will form the basis of the agendas for these quarterly meetings that you're proposing with the heads of all of these departments?
Yes, Chair Scott. Yes.
All right. Thank you. Supervisor Hines.
Thank you, Chair Scott. I just wanted to briefly comment that with regard to affordable housing gap funding, which I think has a lot to do with what we're talking about right now. I think it's pretty impressive that for every dollar we've spent of the $10.9 million, we've leveraged $38 for every dollar. That's like an incredible, this is working. Over 1,000 units have been preserved or created, and we need, at least for the very lowest, in terms of lowest income households, we need another 8,000 units. So I think we can do more of this. It's working really well. I know early on it wasn't necessarily completely universally accepted by all of my colleagues, but now we have data that really shows that this works really well, and I would love to see us increase to the amount that we can possibly increase given the constraints of our budgets, but putting people in some kind of stable housing situation from a medical standpoint and from just a compassion standpoint is just the right thing to do, and it saves us so many different costs in so many other ways. And of course, it's just a decent human thing to be doing for others. So I appreciate that part, and thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Supervisor Hines. Any other questions or comments from board members? Or Ms. Lesher? No? All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Darland. Appreciate it. All right, we will move to item number 15, revised outside agency committee funding recommendations for fiscal year 2024-2025. Ms. Lesher.
Thank you very much, Chair Scott, members of the board. One of the agencies that had been approved for funding by the board is no longer going to be providing those services about care that released about $15,000, released $15,000. And the staff has been working with the outside agency review committee and recommends a redistribution of those $15,000 to, I believe it's 9 agencies who have been working in the senior services area. The reallocation of the $15,000 is what you have before you today.
Thank you, Administrator Lesher. Any questions or comments from board members?
I'd like to move the item.
I'll second that. Item number 15 is moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passes 4-0. We are now going to move to a combination of regular agenda item number 16 and addendum item number 5. These are the after-action reports from both our county recorder and our elections director. Really appreciate both Recorder Casares Kelly and Ms. Hargrove for being here today. And it looks like the slides are already posted for, is this for Ms. Hargrove's report? All right, well then I guess that means you're going first. Does that fit with your timeline, Recorder Casares Kelly? All right, thank you. Oh, and I apologize. Before I call on Ms. Hargrove, I want to acknowledge and thank the chair of our Election Integrity Commission, Mr. Brian Bickle, for being here today. Mr. Bickle, thank you very much, not only for being here, but for your longstanding service to the Election Integrity Commission. I think your mic's not on, Ms. Hargrove.
What is going on? Okay, there we
you go.
Good morning, Chair Scott, members of the board, Ms. Lesher. I'm happy to be here this morning to present the after-action report for the November 2024 general election. Next slide, please. We always talk about a safe and secure election, and I just want to acknowledge that I know that in 2022, when I arrived here, and probably even before that, there was some concern about the implementation of vote centers and the security of the process. There were many unknowns and challenges that we faced. But now with the new check-in process, the way that we were going to issue ballots to voters, the new equipment, the many unknowns were there. So the department has worked tirelessly, as I've noted in my report, over the past 2 years, and especially last year, to understand the technology, understand the process, understand how to program and prepare for the election. And we have now gotten to a point where we're not so reliant on the vendor to program and to troubleshoot and resolve issues for us. And we can do that ourselves, which creates a more secure process. In addition to that, training of our poll workers who are our front line actually helps to secure the process as well. The poll workers during the general election felt more secure about their jobs. They understood what they needed to do. And even with the challenges of a 2-card ballot, they were able to get the job done, have voters come in and cast their ballots, and feel confident at the end of the night about the job that they had done. So as far as being a safe and secure election, I stated in my after-action report that I felt that it was the most safe and secure election that we've had since I've been here, and I do stand by that. So, safety is always a concern, and I just want to state that in a polling place, the poll workers are our frontline defense. So we have to arm the poll workers to be able to ensure that voters are safe, that the equipment is safe, and that everything that we do is safe in that environment. So with the additional trainings that we provide for them, as well as their confidence and knowing that we are there to support them, helps them to ensure that there is safety. Situational awareness is always in the forefront of our minds to make sure that poll workers are observing what's going on in the vote center, as well as what's going on outside of the vote center, and are reporting that information to us as they need to. So as far as getting the information out to voters, I work with the communications department, and we presented a very robust media campaign for voters, as well as a two-card ballot. We reached every demographic. We actually had outreach events last year, which I don't think the elections department has done many of those before, but we attended many outreach events. I actually shared some events with Recorder Casares Kelly. We went to several together, and we presented to different groups, which was very informative to a lot of them. The most informative one for myself, and I think very beneficial to voters, was when we went to Savvy, the school of for the blind, and we took the accessible equipment there. We set up a mock election, and it was very informative to myself and to my staff, as well as my trainer, to see how they navigate through a line to get to the check-in station, as well as how they actually work with the equipment to actually vote a ballot. And it was kind of disheartening to me that our ballot was so long, because with the 19-inch two-card ballot, it took one person about 25 minutes to actually get through that entire process. And he patiently went through and he did it. He thanked us. He was very happy, and he was actually going to vote on election day. He's not an early voter. He's a blind voter, and he was actually going to vote on election day. So he was encouraged that there was something there that he could vote independently. So very, very proud of that, very happy that we had that experience, and we will work really hard with the disability community to ensure that we can make sure everyone can vote a ballot independently if they choose to do so. Election day workers, we had over 1,600 election day workers. Not all of them were poll workers. 1,355 were poll workers, but we hire individuals that work at the receiving stations. We hire troubleshooters that go out and support the polling places on election day, as well as boards that work on election night when those supplies are brought back and ballots are brought back to the office. And so over 1,600 people worked as board workers on election day. That doesn't include any other intermittent employees that we had throughout the election process. But I'm very happy that they were there. They worked tirelessly, and we really depend on our seasonal workers because the staff is really small. So without them, we could not get the job done. Early board processing, this is a big one. I know that lots of people watched this, lots of people commented on this. Early ballots coming through our office from the recorder's office, and the early board had some challenges this election. In addition to the two-card ballot, they also had to learn, new processes on how to document that and how to track that. And it's really critical that we track each affidavit, each ballot. We were calling them ballots, but they were actually the cards. And we had to keep track of both the affidavit envelopes, the number that we received, as well as the number of cards that came through, because not every envelope had two cards in it. Federal only ballots are one card only, and then some individuals may have only turned in one card. And so keeping track of that to go to tabulation was very important, because they were counting the number of cards. And so if that count was not correct, they actually would stop and do a hand count, separate them out to see how many cards they had, and they would do a hand count to ensure that the number was correct. If it did not match up, those ballots went back to the early board for them to go back and find the error. We had individuals that would check the affidavit envelopes after they were empty, just to make sure that we did not miss anything. So there was a lot that went through processing early ballots. one of our sticking points were duplication. Duplication takes a long time, especially when you have such a large ballot. And we did find that that was a bottleneck. We received a lot of ballots to duplicate. We received them later in the election, which caused us some angst, I would say, because we were trying to get those done as quickly as possible. But you know, we have to verify everything that we do. So you duplicate it, and then it has to be verified by someone. And then there's an extra check to ensure that every ballot that went to duplication, there was another ballot that replaced it. So duplication is a sticking point for us. And I'm really, was really heartened by the early board that the last night that we worked, of course, we were working on November the 16th after we received all the ballots from the recorder's office. And the last night that we worked, they were supposed to get off at 6 p.m. And we were not done. We were not close to being done. And without asking them, they stayed. The majority of them stayed until 1 a.m. To complete processing and duplicating the ballots. And then we were able to tabulate those ballots, and we were able to get out before the sun came up. So we were out of here at 3 a.m. On the 17th, and that's when we completed the election. And I can't say enough about the importance of county collaboration. Without my partners, the other departments, department directors, the recorder's office, it could not have been done. There are a lot of moving pieces to an election, and I reached out to my counterparts, and they all rose to the occasion. They didn't ask any questions. There was no pushback. It was, what do you need? And then we moved forward. So I'm really proud to be here in Pima County to work with such dedicated individuals. Next slide, please. This is just a slide of the major expenses that we had during the election, and you can see overtime and temporary workers is high. It would be in a presidential election anyway, but because of the additional hours and times that it took us to process those two-car ballots, it was definitely higher than in any other time. Personnel, election day personnel pretty much stays the same, and ballot cost would have been half that had we only had one ballot, one card. So we would see a significant savings in ballots as long as we do not continue to have two-car ballots going forward. Next slide, please. This slide just shows the early ballots when we received them from the recorder's office. And as you can see, over the course of the last 2 years, 2022 and 2024, there has been an upward trend of receiving ballots the week before the election, lots of ballots, which we do need to adjust for. It's really hard to determine when a voter is going to return a ballot. We can't control that. And so sometimes we just have individuals working, sitting, waiting for work to come in. And then other times we're super busy and we're slammed. And so we have to figure out a way where we can be more flexible in that. The next slide is just a graph of the same thing. And you can see that trend there. Next slide. And so lessons learned. Vote centers, size matters. Size absolutely matters. There were some vote centers that had over 100 voters per hour that they actually processed. Now, that doesn't tell me how many people were in line, but I know they checked in over 100 voters per hour. We need the flexibility to be able to staff up and add additional equipment if needed so that we can get people through the lines quicker. Early ballot processing, again, flexibility is critical. In my report, I noted that we would look at adding a second shift. Second shift would be required because we just do not have enough room to add more boards in the space that we have. And so we are now in the process, my staff and I, of trying to determine the best way to do that, because of course I would have to flex my permanent staff as well so that they could be there for the second shift. and ballot duplication, we are exploring options to actually expedite that process now. We did take a look at something that one of the vendors had, but to me, it's prohibitively expensive and not justifiable, where we could just have more people to actually do the job. Receiving stations. Receiving stations are open on election night when the poll workers, inspectors, and marshals return their ballots and equipment. That's where they take them to, most of them to the receiving stations. And we have 10 receiving stations with varying numbers of polling places that return their supplies there. Some of the vote centers finished earlier than others, and the this receiving station had to wait for those individuals who were later to get there. And so we do want to take a look at a way to ensure that they're not sitting there waiting for the last person, especially in a really large election, so that they can get the ballots back to central receiving sooner so that we can get them processed on election night and get more processed. The last vote center that turned in their supplies during the general election was it was after 1 a.m. And so that meant that those individuals were sitting there for a long time with some other ballots that possibly we could have had here to be able to process. So that is something that we're definitely going to take a look at. What are my concerns? There's a new early ballot process that's already in statute where individuals can bring their early ballots to a vote center, show their identification. We check them in. There has to be a separate check-in and separate line, a separate box for them to go in, and we stamp them ID verified. These ballots do not go to the recorder's office after the election. These ballots stay with the elections department. We open them, process them, and tabulate them. But we still have those other early ballots that we will receive at the vote center that have to go to the recorder's office to be signature verified and then come back to us to be tabulated. And so this new process will add more equipment, more poll workers, and so space is definitely an issue when we're looking at vote centers, ensuring that we can accommodate everything that we need to do for the new law. And the new legislation, there are lots of new legislation, but new legislation has been introduced that will extend, changing it, I don't even think they're calling it emergency voting anymore, but will extend that early voting until 7 p.m. on Monday night, which gives me a little bit of a pause because we ask our poll workers to set up on Monday night to test the equipment to ensure that connectivity and everything is working. If they are not going to be able to get in until probably like 9 o'clock because they need time to close out the early voting location, count the ballots, have those ballots transported, then they will not be able to set up on Monday night, which means that any issues that they encounter will be encountered on Tuesday morning, which is election day. And we try not to do that because not only does that create anxiety for the poll workers and my staff, we could run into a situation where then we have voters in line who are anxious as well because they're trying to resolve an issue that could have been taken care of the night before. So that does give me a little bit of pause for those locations that we share with the recorder's office, but we'll work through it. So next slide, please. And just want to leave you guys with what I feel like were our accomplishments throughout the election. Improved training. Training has improved immensely, and poll workers are really happy about the training classes that we're adding, the hands-on training that they can actually receive. One of those training classes is a simulation class where it is set up like a vote center, and the trainer task inspectors with being inspectors and marshals with being marshals, and they go through the check-in process, scenarios where they would have to void a ballot and scenarios where they would have to issue a provisional ballot, and they actually love that class. They want more of it, but that's kind of difficult because there's a lot of equipment that goes along with that. With streamlined and expedited poll worker payroll, working with the finance department, this has been the smoothest payroll that we've had. I mean, given some of the other issues that we've had since I've been here, so we're really proud of that. We reduced the amount of printer problems encountered on election day. As noted in the report, there were about 17 calls for printer problems as opposed to 50, 60, 70 calls for printer problems when we first started out. That is because we figured out how to transport them. Now we're trying to, figure out how to make them more secure and not have them bouncing around too much before they get to the vote centers. We implemented electronic adjudication, which reduces the number of ballots that we actually have to hand duplicate. And then the creation of Pima.vote, of course, in conjunction with ITD and communications and share responsibility with the recorder's office. We now have a central location where voters can go to find trusted election information. And the biggest one, I believe, was the educating voters about the two-card ballot, because we did have lines on election day. However, I believe that preparing voters in advance, letting them know that this will take longer, you may encounter lines, helped a lot, because there was not a lot of complaints about the lines that they had to stand in on election day. And I believe that is because they anticipated the fact that they would have to wait and it would take longer to vote their ballot. And that is all that I have. Open to any questions unless you want to do the next presentation first.
Sure, Scott.
Because we had separate after action reports, why don't we entertain questions or comments from board members for your report, Ms. Hargrove, and then move on to the recorder's report. Supervisor Hines.
Thank you, Chair Scott. So a few things. I actually voted on election day, and I was kind of surprised when I walked up to get, turn in my ballot. Just you kind of dump the two cards in a box, and I don't know, that made me really, I don't know, I was like a little, I'm like, no, the cards they should be, are they associated in some way with like a barcode or something?
Supervisor Hines, no, they're not. And so that's why we counted cards, because there is no association. And so just to put your mind at ease, so when we had to duplicate a card that we received on election day, we used a different process. We only duplicated that one card because there was no way to know what the other card looked like.
Chair Scott, it just seemed to me that there could be some sort of issue that would require, it would be helpful to have the entire voter's ballot, not just half of it. So, yeah. So, okay, that occurred to me. Was there any way to avoid the multiple card ballot, or it was just so massive it'd be like a piece of paper this, 3 feet long or something? I don't know. It just seems like that cost a lot more and created all sorts of issues. So I was just curious, in terms of the handling of the multi-card ballot, I guess what you learned and how you might make changes specific to that going forward, if any can be made. I don't know.
Chair Scott, Supervisor Hines, no, there was no way to avoid it. A lot of it were the propositions from the legislature. There is one way that we can explore possibly preventing having two cards, is to remove the Spanish from that single ballot and to have two different ballots, an English and a Spanish ballot.
Oh, okay. Last, and this is, I think, my last question on, in terms of like getting closer to the election day, it did look like staffing became more and more of an issue in terms of just like 8, 9, 10 days ahead of time with some attrition. I guess, how is that different this time compared to other times, or is that always an issue? And how do you think we can help with that going forwd?
Chair Scott, Supervisor Hines, that is not normal. It absolutely was not normal. We normally have individuals that return, but of course we staffed up because it was a presidential election. I'm going to explore how we can be a little bit more flexible in bringing people on a lot quicker. The process takes about 2 weeks to actually hire someone to work, and if we could change that somehow, that would be beneficial. But like we did with the poll workers, we had individuals that were standbys. We can also do the same thing for the early board.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Christie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Director, first of all, thank you for your most comprehensive and detailed report. I mean, this is factual, it's to the point, it covers all the bases, it doesn't lead down rabbit holes of any sort. It's out there in front, and it's plain and clear to understand. And you've outlined all of the issues, I think, in a most professional and comprehensive manner, and for that, I thank you. I just have 3 quick observations / questions. I'll frame them all together, and you can respond in the manners you see fit. First of all, I think one of the issues that all of us are not doing enough of, and somehow we might want to develop some sort of a plan, a plan, but it seems to me that the unsung heroes of this whole process are the poll workers. And they need a lot of acknowledgement, a lot of support, a lot of thanks on behalf of all the voters of Pima County. I know you do that internally. I'm sure your management skills reinforce positive actions, but I think it needs to be really drawn out more community-wide, what it does as far as a sacrifice that poll workers make on behalf of our voting process. So maybe there's some plans that we could develop that would actually show the appreciation that they so deserve from our community for their work as a poll worker. Secondly, you hit on it briefly, the election expenses. When did the vote centers go in? Was it 2020?
2022.
2022. So we've seen a distinct rise in the cost from 2020 to 2022, and it's still higher in 2024 than it was in 2020. I think that we were told in so many meetings that vote centers would reduce cost, it would provide a reduction in inconsistencies and streamline the whole process that would result in cost savings. Clearly, we're not seeing that, and I think maybe that could be a topic or a subject for another day. But it does lend to some sort of questioning on my part that we were told that there would be cost savings with the vote centers, and clearly we're not at this point enjoying those cost savings. So we'll think about that along with you and maybe have another discussion at a later date. And it wouldn't be a full presentation on your part if I didn't ask you, and you've kind of highlighted it in numerous statements, but notwithstanding what you've already said, is there anything now that keeps you up awake about the election process?
Chair Scott, Supervisor Christie. The first part with poll workers, I absolutely agree with you. Would love to ensure that they get the recognition that they need because they are the unsung heroes of the whole process. And as far as expenses are concerned, so there's some variables, and I'll definitely can bring anything back to you that you want to see. Possibly a little bit of this is my management style to ensure that there are enough poll workers in a vote center to, effectively check in voters, as well as that there is enough staff in the office to prepare for the election properly. But I'm more than happy to go back and take a look at the cost and bring anything back to you that I find. as far as what keeps me up at night now, the legislature. So
Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry, Supervisor Christie. Administrator Lusher, you wanted to weigh in on Supervisor Christie's
Thank you, Chair Scott and Supervisor Christie. And I think when we can, as the director has mentioned, get more information on the cost, but I think while there has been a line up, I think it's hard to get a full evaluation of how much more we would have been spending as an apples to apples kind of comparison. Because when you look at some of the, some of our largest costs are in ballots. I mean, is in the printing and the paper and things. All of those costs were going up. In addition, since 2018, we've seen a significant increase across the board in those costs. So we're down from last year, and I hope that now we have a lot of the hardware in place. You're going to see a continuation of that decrease. But I guess I think we can have cost savings that we have realized, even though last year the year may have cost a bit more simply because of the number of people who are getting a ballot, the increase in population. There's a lot of things to which we attribute an increased cost, and we'll factor that in as we get additional information for you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from my colleagues? All right, then I had a few questions and comments, Ms. Hargrove. You mentioned that you're going to be working on the hiring process for election board workers and looking to how that process can be streamlined. I'm wondering if the board can get updates as you get either from yourself or the county administrator as to how that is working for you, getting that process streamlined, the role human resources plays in helping you with that. And I was intrigued with what you were looking at with regard to 2 shifts and whether that's something that can be accomplished. So if we can get some additional information as you're looking at the streamlining of all those processes, that would be most helpful.
Sure.
Secondly, your data pointed out that early ballots received the week of the election and the week after the election have more than doubled in compared to 2020 in both 2022 and 2024. And bear in mind, in 2020, we had one of the chairs of our state political parties and the then president, now again president of the United States, telling people to turn their ballots in late. And yet the numbers doubled in both 2022, 2024, based on your data. Do you have any speculation as to why that's happening, why so many people are now turning their ballots in either the week of or the week after the election?
Chair Scott, I have no explanation for it.
Well, I know that to your point earlier, that is a significant concern for the legislature and is being discussed as we speak up there, but I know it's also presents some challenges for your office and certainly for the recorder's office as well because of the signature verification that has to happen in her office. Provisionals went down. They were 18,491 in 2020. 6,849 this year, but that was still up from the 2,561 that we had in 2022. Is that an indication of the increased number of voters that we have in a presidential election year, or do you see any other reason why we'd have that increase in provisionals from 2 years before?
Chair Scott, yes, it is. The presidential election is actually typical that individuals show up to vote who are not registered to vote in the county that they show up to vote in. And so that raises that, as well as and I think Recorder Casares Kelly will probably speak about it, the MVD issue with the federal-only ballots, students, it raises that threshold for provisionals.
All right, thank you. And then also wanted to get some additional information, and anything you want to say today is great, but if you need to compile that for the board, that's fine. I know you're going to be evaluating whether to continue the 126 vote centers that we had, and as you said, size matters with those vote centers. So, but I wanted for the board to get some additional information on the other criteria that you use for not just evaluating the vote centers and whether we move forward with the same list, but also the evaluation process that you use for the receiving stations. Because maybe I just overlooked it in previous after action reports, but I wasn't aware of the roles of the receiving stations. And would like to hear some more as you and your team are evaluating both the vote centers and the receiving stations.
Yes, Chair Scott, I will get back to you with that information. And just so you know, you didn't miss anything. It was never in my after action report.
All right. All right. Thank you so much, Director Hargrove. Appreciate it. We will now move on to the presentation and after action election report from our recorder. And Recorder Caceres Kelly, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Chair Scott, members of the board. I do have a question before I get started. It came to my attention just this morning that we had not included an additional supplemental report that has some numbers and also the media release. I do have copies of those available for you all, and I did ask for Nico to bring those bring that up. Is that okay to submit?
I think that's absolutely fine. It's connected with the item, definitely.
So,
I'm correct in that, aren't I, Mr. Brown? Okay.
Okay, my staff member will bring those up right now. I do not have a PowerPoint presentation prepared, though that was beautiful. Thank you, Director Hargrove. The Recorder's Office, we encountered very many challenges this election cycle. Many of them beyond our control. One of the major ones that we dealt with prior to the election beginning was a change in the documentary proof of citizenship and documentary proof of residency requirements, which meant that in order for us to accept a voter registration, we first had to triage what additional documents a voter had before we could recommend which form for them to fill out. This is very different. Normally, we would just submit a Arizona voter registration form to anybody wanting to register, and if they were missing documentation, we would then contact them afterwards. Because of this judicial change, we would have to reject someone's voter registration. Given that very short time frame, it required us to do a considerable amount of outreach and communications throughout the county, throughout the state, because this was a statewide issue. And it actually resulted in multiple lines for voter registration prior to the voter registration deadline. This also did change the way that voters were able to receive a ballot. So we talked a little bit about federal-only ballots. If someone had submitted a voter registration form but did not provide documentary proof of citizenship or documentary proof of residency, that voter would be considered a federal-only voter, and they would only have only the president, Senate, and congressional races on their ballot. In order for them to change it, which they were allowed because of this judicial ruling, they would then have to submit those proof of residency or citizenship. So we had people coming with their birth certificates, with their leases for their apartments to show us residency, many different documentation that we had to deal with at the beginning and throughout the election process. And that went all the way until election day. and that required us to shift there as well. If somebody voted on election day and needed a provisional ballot for that reason, they still needed to show us that documentation, and so we had to pivot and allow for people to email us that information from a vote center. So they were having to deal with the two different offices. So that was a major challenge, a major communication challenge. I will say that as Director Hargrove had mentioned, some of the outreach that we had done prior to the election, especially at University of Arizona, was really, really beneficial. And we had many, many students showing up with their passports, with their birth certificates, with their proof of citizenship and residency, and it was very, very helpful. This board had Vice Chair Grijalva had advocated for an extension of early voting at the University of Arizona, and that was extremely beneficial. We did have a large number of students participate in that, and the majority of those who were going through at that location were having to submit that additional documentation. And so it was very, very beneficial for that. We also saw lines within early voting. We saw that at our downtown office and also almost consistently at our Oro Valley location, as well as our location on the east side at Fellowship Bible Church. That was a common situation, and we were very pleased by the volume. The voters who were coming were very patient. They were very happy to be getting their votes out of the way, and so they were patient, and we didn't receive very many complaints. And we, throughout the entire election, as far as the facilitation of early voting locations, we had no major stopping points or outages. So we remained consistent. Our technology worked. We were very happy with that, minus just a few reboot type of situations here or there. There was nothing that was preventing voters from voting. Overall, it was very successful. And I agree. I echo Director Hargrove's statements regarding safety. This was a very safe election. We were very happy for that. However, one thing that we were largely impacted by was the perception of safety. And so we had we don't refer to our workers, our temporary workers, as poll workers. Poll worker indicates just the one day. I know Director Hargrove has more than that who work a longer period of time, but our site workers is how we refer to them, because they work at minimum of at least 7 days at a location for a full week, Sunday off, and then emergency voting on Monday. But we had many site workers who, after going through the safety training that we provide within our office, chose, I'm not going to do this de-escalation, I'm concerned, and because of their perception, walked out right in the middle of training. And so we encountered that situation many times. We also, we have to hire a large number. We hired 187 temporary workers who were working a minimum of 3 months at a time, and for many of them, they are searching for a permanent position. And so we lost a lot of people to permanent positions throughout the course of the election as well. We do heavily rely on our retired population, and many people have been coming for years and years and returning. Unfortunately, when we tried to switch into the shifts, because we did do shifts for signature verification, many of those retired folks expressed concerns about driving at night and just being able to to be there and a later shift. And so we really struggled with that second shift of recruiting young folks. And it did take a very long time for us to onboard those folks to begin with. However, we felt that despite the volume and despite ballots going out late, having to do with the issue that we've discussed previously, that it was a very successful election, and we're very happy with our overall performance within the office. My staff worked very, very hard. We are also very grateful to the numerous departments that came to our aid, along with the increased communication between the recorder's office and the elections department, the work from facilities and finance, legal, literally transportation, every single department, the assessor's office, the county attorney's office, all of those, we would not have been successful without the help of our colleagues throughout the county. IT played a very big role, communications. We were very responsive. We noticed that there was many more general questions that people were just able to find on our website or on our phone scripts. On our automated system before having to talk with an individual. So we saw a lot of success in this last election cycle.
Thank you, Recorder Casares. Kelly, questions or comments from board members? Supervisor Christie?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, Madam Recorder, reading your after-action report, it really could not be put in a more stark contrast between your report and Director Hargrove's, where Director Hargrove was concise, comprehensive, to the point, detail-oriented. Yours was not that in any sense of the word. It was glossed over in so many areas that, quite frankly, it reminded me when I was selling cars, and it was new car introduction month from Chrysler, and we'd get PR packets and advertising packets. For instance, in your conclusion, although the first presidential election overseen by the current administration had challenges, it was still wildly successful. Wildly successful. You never have answered to my satisfaction, and I think to the satisfaction of many individuals in our community, about the portal termination. You go on to say, this office is continually working to innovate our operations, and the Recorder's Office is committed to providing transparent, efficient, and fair elections. Is that why you won't allow observers for the month of early voting? We talk about the portal issue. You blame a district boundary error that was discovered. That's somebody else's fault. It's not your fault. There was no way you could have discovered it in a more timely fashion. It led to an unavoidable delay. We quickly realized that the unprecedented number of requests would not be able to be processed. That's troubling. What other possible unprecedented number of requests won't be processed? On October 19th, 1 week before the October 26th deadline to request a ballot, we deactivated the online request form. The last time you were here, you were asked, did you discuss this issue of the portal termination with legal advice from the county attorney? After a long explanation, you finally came to the point that after you terminated the portal was when you asked if you were doing this legally. Not before terminating it, after the fact. What's the saying about ask for accommodation first and apologize later? That was never addressed properly either. Then it says, many of the ballot requests we could not be completed due to missing or corrected many of the ballot requests. We don't know how many. You go on to say, even more troubling, that the system was inherited from the previous administration and had not come to the attention of the current administration. The previous administration had been there for decades. If there's something existing, it's certainly there that for everybody to see. And to blame somebody else again is the theme throughout your report. And finally, most troubling, I guess, is we are confident that most voters who requested a ballot using our online form either received their already queued ballots or voted early in person. Most. If there's one person that's not receiving their ballot, that's one too many. So I have to say that I think there's a lot of issues that you're glossing over here. Your report is a kind of a rah-rah type of pat on the back situation. I recognize there were issues, limitations of presidential election, but you and your office knew about all those things prior to the election. There should have been adequate planning for it. There should have been an understanding that there was going to be a lot of activity in certain areas, and then you had to plan for it, and there were no plans in place and no action taken. So I think all in all, that there are more questions than you've given us answers here. And I'm just hoping that your wildly successful opinion of the results is well-founded. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Recorder Castrovis Kelly.
Chair Scott, Supervisor Christie, as I've stated, the supplemental document that I submitted this morning does have a complete it's a 3-page document that, pardon me, it includes a 3-page media release of the very exact details regarding the portal situation, which I went into extreme detail in a previous meeting, which is why I did not add that as a major portion of this report. The other things that I am talking about that, as you said, these are things you should have prepared for. Preparing for judicial rulings that inherently change the dynamic of voter registration is not something that we can prepare for. That was something that we get a ruling, we have to follow the law, we have to respond to it. And I think that our staff responded beautifully. We had to provide a lot of communication. We had to make a lot of changes. And so we were able to be very nimble, and that is successful. Communicating the very bare minimum of what requirements are for voter registration, that is a major portion of the work that we do. As far as the ballots going out late, that both myself and Director Hargrove have gone and talked about that extensively, about the difficulty, and we were also very thankful to our vendor, to Runbeck, for getting out the ballots in the time that they did, despite the delay. Again, those ballots did go out. One of the situations that could have happened is we could have sent the wrong ballot to every single Pima County voter and then had to send a new one. And that is a success because we didn't have to do that. Everybody, the information that they received was accurate. The ballots that they received were accurate. That is a success. The increases in communication, given the given the spacing issues that we have, we literally cannot hire more people. And I'm really glad to hear you talking about the preparation of that, because we're already looking at the 2028 election cycle when we're going to have this same volume or higher. It will be exponential number of voters, and we have to prepare. We have since acquired a large space. It is essentially doubling the current space that we're in now. We need additional funding, which we're going to be asking the county for, to develop this infrastructure that is critical to the operations of our office. As Director Hargrove said, she could not have more people in her space because she's running out of space. I'm running out of space. The number of early voters is increasing, will continue to increase exponentially. We are doing everything that we can to address these needs. The portal situation, in the past, unfortunately, if those had not been completed, they were simply not completed. I don't know how else to say that without tearing down the strong foundation that I inherited. It was robust. However, we are continuing to grow, and that growth and an issue such as a delayed ballot creates a much larger situation that hadn't been encountered before. I can claim full responsibility for those things. However, as we have detailed in the past, I have been very upfront about the challenges and the reasons these situations have been occurring. We are talking about them. We're putting them out to the public. We're communicating them. And more than that, we're telling people the resources and where to go to find what they need. Our customer service has been exceptional during this period. And redirecting voters to immediately solve their problem as opposed to continue to wait and hope that they would receive the information in a timely manner is the reality of what we were faced with, and we made a choice, and I stand by that choice. As far as the observations and having observers at our early voting sites, again, we have beaten a dead horse on this subject. It is not, that does not provide additional service to the voter. Our commitment is to the voter. If there are people who want to see what is happening and they want the training, they should come work for us. We need more help. Have them apply. Thank you.
Supervisor Grijalba.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm always really disheartened when I hear a lot of finger pointing, a lot of accusations, a lot of kind of perpetrating misinformation to our community. It's incredibly frustrating. I want to thank you for being very transparent about what has happened and not happened. And one of the only things that I would like to recommend for both departments is if you can try to work together a little more closely, so the early voting sites and the early polling, but so those locations can be co-located as much as possible. I know that it's difficult because you have, I don't know that most people understand that the equipment, you just can't like hand it off and go, okay, the space is yours now. That you literally have to take out, the recorder's office takes out their equipment and director of elections brings in their equipment. I mean, I just don't think people understand that, but as much as possible in order to, make it easier for people to find. I think the U of A is a really prime example of how frustrating that process is. And so, but I do think ideally it would be nice, especially in some of our other community locations, if those can be co-located, it would be really beneficial. But I want to thank you all. I do think that the election was wildly successful. I do think that it was safe. I think that it was an incredibly difficult election, and we did have a lot of people. I mean, I went to a couple polling places, and literally the volume of people walking in with a ballot was about the same as the people that were waiting in line, and sometimes more, which I think it would be very helpful if you all can talk a little bit about what that means, because I think people think it's safe. Now it's at the polling place and now it is safe and I can walk away. What happens to those ballots? And I believe that a lot of the delay in processing and getting our numbers had to do with some of those well-meaning people that want to get their ballot, to the poll. But how did that affect when we were getting completed numbers for like who's voted and how they voted?
Do you want to answer? Me too.
Chair Scott, Supervisor Grahova. So yes, their voters can drop off their early ballots on election day. Some of those voters actually may have spoiled their ballot and actually gotten a ballot and voted it that day as well. But those ballots have to come back to my office. We count them at the vote center. Then they have to go to the recorder for signature verification and come back to my office again. So it goes through a few transitions before they're actually counted. I can't put all the blame on those voters this time because we did have that bottleneck before the election where we had a lot of ballots that we needed to process. But yes, that does delay processing ballots if we have to go through that. And yeah.
Thank you.
Chair Scott, Supervisor Grijalva, we received the ballots. Those, we call them late earlies. The late earlies are received the day after election. This cycle, there were around 3,000, I have these numbers in the report, that were dropped off at the recorder's offices directly, and then the rest were at the vote centers throughout the county, resulting in around 45,000 late earlies. So early ballots, mail ballots that were dropped off on election day. For reference, our staff can process around 15 to 20,000. When we're focused, we can do about 20,000 in a day. So that is about 2 days. Because we don't receive those early ballots until midday, so it takes us about 2.5 days to process those. That is a piece of legislation that is being proposed right now. They are wanting to end the deadline to submit an early ballot would be Friday at 7 p.m., which would mean Saturday emergency voting, Monday emergency voting, and Tuesday election day voters would not be able to drop off a ballot in person, a mail ballot. And I have a huge concern about that because of Pima County is very rural, and we only have 18 voting locations on that Monday and on the Saturday and the Monday prior to the election. There's only 18 throughout the entire county where people can drop off. We are planning on implementing ballot drop boxes. However, it would not be in the hundreds. It would probably be in the tens or the 20s, the number of ballot drop boxes we could install throughout the county, which would mean inherently a longer drive for many of those people who are dropping off ballots at a later time. So that is something that is concerning. However, it is mostly being pushed forward through Maricopa County, who had hundreds of thousands of ballots. I think they had around 280,000 late earlies dropped off on election day. We are not seeing that type of volume here, and we do encourage people to, if they are voting early, to actually vote early and return that ballot as soon as possible. I think even people in this room who are very active voters are even challenged with that often. But it is an ongoing situation, and we're encouraging people to respond as soon as possible with their ballots.
Any other questions or comments from my colleagues? I had a couple, if I could. You mentioned at the end of your after-action report, Recorder Casarez-Kelly, that the ballot request system was not tied to the voter database, and you and your team are looking at a number of improvement ideas for the redesign of the ballot request portal. I'd like to ask that the Board of Supervisors be updated as you go through that process of redesign, because I think some of the concerns that you've heard today, we certainly would be interested in knowing how they're going to be addressed by the redesign.
Chair Scott, absolutely. I think that is, I think that would be very helpful, and to get that feedback also. The way that the system is currently designed is a request can be submitted despite, again, it's not tied into the voters, it's not tied to our voter database at all. So if a voter were to put in that request, they don't get something that says, oh, you're already on the active early voting list, or this is the address we're going to send it to. And this is how to submit an address change. It doesn't say anything like that currently. And what sometimes happens is people put in the wrong information, or they assume what is in their record and then request it for that previous address. And so there's a lot of maintenance that has to happen. Many people think that they're correcting their address when they submit a change to the U.S. Post Office, but that does not automatically come to us. We get that notification, however, because they have not requested in writing or by form, which then has a signature, we by law cannot make those changes. We know that many people have multiple properties, they have multiple places where they want their mail sent, and so anytime there are changes like that, we do send them a notification directly through U.S. Post Office. However, people sometimes don't read their mail and they don't make those updates, and so this would this would cut down on the number of people submitting incorrect, impartial requests with missing information by tying it to our voter database.
Thank you. And then you mentioned in response to questions from Supervisor Grijalva that we may begin to implement the use of ballot drop boxes. Your after-action report noted that unlike other Arizona counties, we do not currently utilize unstaffed ballot drop boxes, but that we might moving forward. Wondered if you could comment a little bit more on what you're looking at there, and also what might be done to increase the amount of staff time devoted to drive-through ballot drop-off, which your report indicated was quite popular, but difficult to staff at the level that you'd like.
Yes. Chair Scott, members of the board, the ballot drop boxes are utilized by every other county except for Pima County. That was actually something that has been on my radar from day one. However, the amount of infrastructure needs and technology upgrades that we needed to do that were much more pressing than having ballot drop boxes. Ballot drop boxes kind of took a back seat to that. So we are looking forward to implementing them. We have just begun having those conversations about where to place them. We are just on the heels of debriefing this last election with our staff, and then that will be our next major project within the office. As far as the drive-through ballot drop boxes, I'm sorry, let me continue with the unstaffed drop boxes. Those, there's there are some best practices that include having them only at certain locations, such as like county facilities or government facilities. I know one of the main ones for us, we're challenged with that because we have the Thon-Otham Nation, which needs a drop box. However, due to tribal sovereignty, we don't have any county facilities on that reservation, and so then we have to think outside the box there. They would be equipped with fire suppression devices in there. They would be bolted into the ground. There is some question about cameras, about whether or not we can have cameras in some areas that it would seem likely if we can, we will. But in some areas, it may not be practical for us to have camera on those, maybe trail cams. I don't know. We're having to explore and discuss with other counties some of the best practices that they've found to secure those. And again, though, that is something that we're just beginning to have those early discussions on throughout our office. The drive-through ballot drop boxes this cycle, which were staffed tents that had a table and a ballot drop box. That is what those were. Allowed for people to drive through, hand over a ballot. My staff would take that ballot affidavit envelope, put it into the box, and then they could drive away. That was very successful. We were challenged with the wind, trying to carry away tents. During that time period, it's very hot, and it is a big ask for our intermittent staff workers. So there's a lot of rotation that has to occur in order for us to be mindful of heat safety concerns, and also just parking lots in general. Smaller parking lots we were not able to have those locations, and so it was a little difficult. We're challenged with space everywhere. As Supervisor Grijalva had mentioned, the interest in having a location at the University of Arizona, that I think is a really perfect example of some of the challenges that occur between the Recorder's Office and the Elections Department. So we need a space that is available for up to a week at a time. Sometimes it will be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or it could be 4 weeks. And that means that whatever space is dedicated to that, so let's say Oro Valley Public Library, they're not able to have programming in their multipurpose room for almost an entire month. That's a really long period of time, and that includes Election Day. At the University of Arizona, the facility that we were provided with is one that was accessible to students and to faculty and staff. However, it was not as accessible to the general public, so people couldn't just drive their car up and go and use the early voting site. However, on Election Day, which is only one day, they then went to the church, which was across the way from the campus, which had public parking that was not did not require pay for parking, but they only needed it for the one day. Those are kinds of some of the challenges that we're dealing with, and so when we talk about the drive-through drop-off, that also plays a factor of what other uses are being utilized in parking lots. And so we kept it this cycle to just our 4 locations. Those were the high volume. So the Recorders Downtown, the Recorders Country Club, the Fellowship Bible Church on the east side, and the Oro Valley Public Library. And those 4, we did have walkie-talkies, we did have rest breaks, we had safety vests for our staff, and people were really appreciative. A lot of people, I was able to cover for some staff for a couple of hours, I think, one day. We were really low on people, and I went out and got to talk with voters as they drove through. And we had people who were, maybe wheelchair users or, people with their elder parents who have difficulty with mobility and things like that. And so they were really appreciative of having that service.
Thank you, Recorder Kosseris-Kelly. I know there's a great deal of community interest, certainly board interest in all of the topics that we've discussed with you today. So if we can get updates as changes are made, especially to the redesign of the ballot request portal, that would be really helpful. And Ms. Lesher, if we could get an update on how we are best making use of the space that the board agreed to lease, it was indicated that it was going to be a benefit not just to the recorder's office, but to the elections division. I think that would be helpful given some of the things that we heard today. Anything else? All right. Well, I want to thank again the recorder and the elections director for being here today and for their after action reports. Thanks very much. Okay. All right. Well, I have had a request for a couple of reasons to move to item number 3 on the addendum, which is an executive session requested by the county attorney's office. I will entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So move.
And I will second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we're in exec. was for information only. And then we're going to move to addendum item number 4, which is the result of the executive session item. And I will move approval of addendum item number 4.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Supervisor Grijalva. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passes 4-0. And just while we're on the addendum, I will note that we had taken care of item number 5. If it's okay with the board, since we're on the addendum, I'll just go through item number 6 and 7, and then we'll move back to the regular agenda. Item number 6, Hale International Recruitment US LLC to provide a Hale Finance and Human Resources Staffing Consulting and Services Agreement for professional services with expertise in Workday. Administrator Lesher.
Thank you, Chair Scott. As we transitioned all the financial systems and our HR systems to the new ERP, there are literally hundreds of thousands of distinct connections, if you will, that need to line up. If we've got codes, very specific budget codes that a grant might be awarded to, et cetera, they have to be perfect. My IT way of describing this is if a zipper has to just perfectly line up and then it's smooth as silk. Occasionally, 1 or 2 of those little pieces don't get lined up, and they take what is the equivalent of journal entries for each of the pieces in finance, or if somebody's payroll has linked into an incorrect withholding or something of that. Once the multitude is simply lined up, there are some that require physical entries and modifications. That is what this is for. And we are looking at, while I know the BOCER refers to the general funds, these funds have already been budgeted within the department. So both the finance and HR department will be utilizing their current existing budget to hire these people on. It's more a cost-effective way to come in and get the absolute experience we need with Workday rather than hiring staff to do so. And it is also more cost-effective than actually having it have been a part of the Workday contract, because if it were part of Workday, we would be buying a different level of service and it would be much more expensive. So this is simply some, if you will, temporary employees for finance and HR to get the last adjustments made to ensure that the last of the transition to the new systems.
Thank you, Administrator Lesher. Any comments or questions from board members?
Chair Scott?
Supervisor Christie.
Ms. Lesher, if you could please correct me if I'm not detailing this line of history correctly. We are providing $250,000 that you say that it says from the general fund, but you say it's already budgeted, but nonetheless it appears is coming from the general fund, which
to those departments in this year's budget.
Okay. And the purpose of this grant is to provide professional services with expertise in processing Workday financial and human resource transactions, creation of procedure documentation specific to Workday and county rules and processes. Workday was designed to replace ADP.
In part, yes.
In part. As Workday was being implemented, it was not readily integrated with ADP, so we had to extend the terminated contract with ADP to keep ADP on board along with Workday to work together to implement Workday. Now, it seems that we can't implement Workday even though we have ADP retained and we're paying both. So now we have to hire Hale International for $250,000 to train our staff who can't seem to be able to learn Workday. And additionally, I'd like to know what department and what individual is leading this installation, and when did Workday begin after it was and meant to replace ADP? But here again, we're still using ADP because we extended ADP's contract. Now we're bringing in a third vendor to integrate the whole system because our employees can't learn Workday. Where am I wrong?
Thank you. Chair Scott, Supervisor Christie, Workday is implemented in both our financial systems and our HR systems. It is fully implemented. We have had success in those last pieces. As I mentioned, what this is a transition from one resource enterprise software system to another. And most of that these days happens electronically as we simply do the transfer. There are some journal entries, if you will, that need to go through this process and make any of those minor modifications that that need to be made if they didn't line up as I described it earlier. It's not that no one knows how to do it. What we're trying to find is the most cost-effective way to come in and make those final additions. One of the reasons that we've got ADP went through the end of the year and we're looking for those transitions for the Band-Aid time, if you will, to get to the new system is so that we could absolutely ensure that every one of those transactions occurred correctly, appropriately, and that everything is now funding to the right allocations. For example, we may have funds that were lining up within a department out of the general fund, but then may also need to be allocated to a grant in part. Many of those are rather complicated financial modifications that need to occur. It's not part of the Workday process of understanding if the systems are correct, they're up, they're working. We have staff who could do this if we had full complements of staff in either of those departments. This is in effect temporary staff to get the adjustments made.
And what were those departments again, Mr. Chair?
Finance and Human Resources.
They're leading the implementation of Workday?
Workday has been implemented. There is a team that has been working on implementing Workday for the last 4 years, 3-4 years. There is an individual, in charge of that effort. There's an executive team working on it. But now that it's time to come back and make any of those minor adjustments that might need to occur as journal entries, some will be part of the finance department, some will be part of the HR department.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Lesher.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Just to clarify, Ms. Lesher, this is not an additional expense because the money is already budgeted into these two departments.
Chair Scott, that is correct.
Secondly, could this be accurately described as a train the trainers endeavor that is part of the transition from ADP to Workday?
Chair Scott, I would say no, in that, again, there's been a lot of training that's taken place. People know how to do this. There are simply I think the biggest piece of this in the finance world are those what I would call journal entries that simply are those kinds of modifications that would either go to staff and short-staffed in the finance department or HR, or as I say, in this case, it's the temporary work that we're bringing in.
And as it was said in the backup, these are temporary employees who will be used on an as-needed basis.
Absolutely. This is a not-to-exceed contract amount.
All right. Supervisor Christie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of follow-ups. Ms. Lesher, would you describe or characterize the implementation of Workday on time and on budget?
I'm Chair Scott, Supervisor Christie. I'm hesitating on that in that there have been some modifications to the initial budget. Things have come in on time. There are just the final tweaks that we have needed. We knew that Workday would be transitioning at the end of the year, and the ERP is moving along. I see those as on time. I'm happy to provide a follow-up to look at what any additional cost there might have been from when we initially budgeted this 4 years ago and provide that.
Right. Appreciate the discussion. I will move the item for approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Supervisor Grijalva. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passes 4-0. We'll move now to item number 7 on the addendum, Election Integrity Commission appointment of Cam Juarez to replace Barbara Tellman. That was put on the addendum by Supervisor Grijalva.
Thank you. I'd like to move the item and thank Ms. Tillman for 10 years of service on the Election Integrity Commission.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Item passes 4-0. We'll go back to the regular agenda, and we are on item number 17, monthly financial update. Ms. Lesher.
Thank you, Chair Scott. And just while Ms. Moulton is here, Director Moulton is here, today's presentation and the update will be provided by the incoming Finance Director, Mr. Art Cuaron. He's got his, as we've said, phone a friend in the background for this last meeting, but Mr. Cuaron will go through these items. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lesher. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, it's a pleasure to come before you this afternoon to present the financial update for period 5, which runs through November of 2024. We do have a brief presentation. There are only 2 slides, so I'm going to hit some highlights for you. If you could turn the slide, please. I know this is really small to see, but this information was included in your packet materials as well with the memo from the county administrator. A couple highlights on this page, starting with the general fund revenues. We are projecting them through November to exceed the budget by a little over $6 million. The categories here are that make up that $6 million are state shared sales tax, an increase of $2 million in the current fiscal year, and we are projecting that to increase to remain in FY26 as we begin budget deliberations. There's also a $3.3 million refund from the Arizona Long-Term Care System, which is programmed in the departmental budgets that you see on in the memo. And then we are seeing slight increases in departmental revenues when you net that against a small $700,000 decrease in real property revenues. That makes the culmination of that close to $6 million general fund revenue that we're projecting an increase for in 25. Moving on to the expenditures, the general fund expenditures, we are trending below budget by almost $5 million, which is a good sign. Departments are being prudent in the monitoring of their expenditures thus far this fiscal year. That being said, we do have 2 departments that we noted in the memo that are projected to exceed their budget by $500,000, with one being community workforce development in the amount of $735,000. Part of this is a $600,000 it's a budget adjustment for a job path contract that was awarded to the community workforce development from economic development. And then we have $135,000 in renovations for PVHS. I do have some additional information that the department does expect to come in below that budget amount. And then we also have some other items that in community workforce development that we're monitoring with the department. The Sheriff's Department is also projected to be over budget by approximately $4.7 million. This is largely due to overtime in initial appearance pay, as well as continued inflationary costs for food, fuel, and utilities. I will also note that as we are preparing our preliminary period 6 forecast, we do have an additional department that you will see very likely over budget, and that is PDS, which I understand is Public Defense Services, and we're anticipating an approximate $2 million shortfall in that budget as well, but we will bring that back with you for you during the period 6 financial update in February. With that, I'll pause for any questions that you may have on this slide before we turn to the next slide.
Questions, comments from board members?
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. This slide is included, and it may be hard to see from the dais, but this is our property tax rate over the last 10 years. The top bar is orange, and it denotes the total maximum allowable rate that we could have levied in each one of those fiscal years. The blue bar line at the bottom represents what we actually levied in each one of those given years. And there's a couple takeaways on this particular slide. One being the county has consistently levied below the maximum allowable rate each one of those given fiscal years dating back to FY15. And then except for a 4% increase from FY23 to 24, tax rates have steadily declined from a 10-year high of 5.97 in FY18. The reason that we're showing this is, as we noted in the memo, we are programming in a 9.5-cent increase in the tax rate to account for state cost shifts of nearly $11 million that we saw in this fiscal year. And so we're including that as we're teeing up our budget discussions moving forward in February, March, and April. With that, I will note that we will come back before you on February 18th to present supplemental budget requests, and again on March 18th to present the CIP. And with that, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'll ask for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Quaron. Any questions or comments from board members?
Yeah,
Supervisor Hines.
Just quickly, I think it's important that when we talk about the state, like the legislature tossing extra expenses onto us, which then triggers the policy we have to increase our primary property tax rate I think we should just call it state property tax, just because it's much easier for people to understand. They don't get quite as upset with us. So just a nomenclature issue. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments? All right. Any parting words, Ms. Moulton?
Chair Scott, supervisors, it's been a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you. All right. We will move to item number 18. Actually, since these are both under Finance and Risk Management, any objection to moving 18 and 19? Okay, I will read the resolution number for 19, resolution number 2025-2, and I will move items 18 and 19.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Supervisor Grijalva. Discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Sir.
A couple of questions. Staff recommends $1.3 million because the projected expense is off by that amount. That's the first question. Off by $1.3 million. And what safeguards are going to be in place or are already in place to make sure, if this is indeed a over expense, that it doesn't happen again? And then, Mr. Chair, a question on 19. It talks about designating the CFO, Chief Fiscal Officer. Who is that?
Administrator Lesher, if you could respond to those.
Certainly, thank you. Chair Scott, Supervisor Christie, regarding fleet services, the $1,359,658 was budgeted in last year's budget for the purchase of vehicles. The vehicles did not arrive. Therefore, we need to pay it this year because the vehicles did arrive in the new fiscal year, but we do not, and so it's in effect rolling the monies over. We did not have it, the budget authority in this year's budget because it was in last year's. So that's the issue is we did not receive the vehicles during the fiscal year in which was initially budgeted.
Mr. Chair, so the money was allocated to buy them last year, but the vehicles didn't come in, but we still have the money. They're coming in this year, and they're being released. The funds are being released to purchase those vehicles that finally arrived.
That's exactly it.
I wonder who this terrible party is.
And the second thing, thank you very much. And item 19, our current Chief Fiscal Officer is Ellen Moulton. We will be looking to transfer that to our new Director of the Department, Mr. Art Quaron.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So all in favor of approving both 18 and 19? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Items pass 4-0. We'll move now to item number 20, revisions to personnel policy. Ms. Lesher.
Thank you, Chair Scott. With 8.117 is modifying the ability of directors and elected officials to hire employees up to the midpoint of the range rather than the first quartile. After we implemented the classification compensation system, and in order to ensure equity, we encouraged those individuals to hire in the first quartile, and anything above that required the approval of the county administrator. What we're seeing as life moves on is that directors and elected officials can make that decision, can be more competitive, can hire up to the midpoint within their budgets and to maintain equity, and can do so simply without approval of the county administrator.
And these are historically hard to fill positions where we're competing within the applicant pool, sometimes with the private sector, sometimes with other governments, sometimes both.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair?
Supervisor Christie.
Explain to me the midpoint terminology versus first quartile?
Chair Scott and Supervisor Christie, each of the grades, if you will, has a range, and there's a bottom of it, the range, and the top of the range. If you see we are advertising for positions sometimes, it will indicate that the starting salary is between X and Y. Those are divided into quarters, and we had historically, or after the implementation of class and comp this last couple of years, encouraged people to be hired in the first quartile, and that anything above that would take approval. We're now looking at the midpoint, which means if you take a range for any one of these positions from the lowest salary possible to the highest within the range, this would be the midpoint, or halfway between the top and the bottom.
Okay. Mr. Chair, and just, you are not convinced, but very certain that the implementation of this revised policy will add to a smoother hiring experience?
Chair Scott, Supervisor Christie, I believe so, yes. That will, one of the concerns that we hear frequently is how long it takes for some of these processes to go through. This will now allow for a director working with HR and finance to make the determination on the ground and not to wait for a process by which that has to come to me for approval and to be signed off on.
Thank you, Ms. Lesher. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of approving item number, oh, I'm sorry, I thought I made one. Oh, well, you would know that I didn't. All right, I'll move approval of item number 20.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Supervisor Grijalva. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passes 4-0. Moving on to item number 21, City of Tucson Amendment Number 1 to provide for fiscal year 2024 shelter and services allocated. Administrator Lesher.
Supervisor Scott, this is, we have contracted historically with the City of Tucson for the City of Tucson to provide non-congregate shelters, or they have been providing service access in hotels and motels. This is decreasing that contract by about $2.8 million. We are seeing the numbers going down, and we simply do not need this kind of capacity or this kind of contract with the city, so we're lowering it to the decreased amount based on what we believe is necessary. We don't have these dollars yet. I know it has been suggested at one point that could we give this back. This has been the transition to the new SSP funding, which means we are reimbursed after the fact. So this is $2.8 million that at this point we will simply not be billing to the federal government for these services.
Thank you, Administrator Lesher. Questions or comments?
Chair Scott.
Supervisor Christie.
So this is coming from SSP?
Chair Scott, Supervisor Christie, yes, Shelter and Services Program.
Chairman Scott, Ms. Lesher, which bucket of FEMA, this is the SSP is the bucket in FEMA?
Yes, sir.
It's coming from. Mr. Chair, how much more money has not been drawn down? Are there any other monies that we're expecting not to be needed in FEMA? from FEMA?
Chair Scott, Supervisor Christie, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I'm happy to get a full report back to the board of the status of the dollars.
And, Mr. Chair, what if FEMA said, we've got these monies available, but we want to redirect them, for instance, exporting migration?
Chair Grijalva and Supervisor Christie, one of the things that we've been evaluating is what is the status of those funds in that could a new administration or new management within FEMA reallocate dollars that have already been allocated for this process. We have been looking at that with our lobbyists and believe at this point that that cannot be done legally because they have been pre-authorized. My concern has been, so I think you may be suggesting, if these are dollars that we are to be reimbursed, we don't want to get out on any kind of ledge and not have those dollars reimbursed.
You're not even asking.
All right. Not these. There may be other dollars, but we are confident in that current bucket of money remaining in place. We are all watching together what the future will hold of funding.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and I will move the item for approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Supervisor Grijalva. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passes 4-0. Let's move now to health. Any objection to taking 22 and 23 together? Okay, I will move items 22 and 23.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Items pass 4-0. Move to item number 24 under procurement, Line and Space LLC, amendment number 4 to provide for architectural and engineering design services at Northwest County Service Center. I'll move the item.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Supervisor Grijalva. Administrator Lesher, any comment?
No, sir.
All right. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed?
Item passes 3-1 with Supervisor Christie opposed. Item number 25, Federal Highway Administration Amendment number 2 to provide for AZ flat PIM FR 510 parentheses 1 Sabino Canyon Park Road.
I'll move the item.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, discussion.
One quick question, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Do we have any idea when we're breaking ground?
Administrator Lesher.
Chair Scott, not Madam Chair. Chair Scott, Supervisor Christie, we will get an update on that. The construction project will be managed by the U.S. Forest Service, so let me get that information and we'll communicate it back to the board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Item passes 4-0. Under grant application and acceptance, any objection to taking 26 through 30?
I have a question on 26, Mr. Chair.
Okay, let's do that separately then. Item number 26, acceptance, community and workforce development, Arizona Department of Economic Security. Amendment number 12 to provide for the Community Action Services Program and amend grant language.
I'll go ahead and move the item.
Second. So it's moved and seconded. Supervisor Christie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can we know, do we know, or can it be told, does any of this money go to the eviction service EELS?
Administrator Lesher.
Chair Scott, Supervisor Christie, I believe not. Is there any portion of this that does?
So, Chair Scott and Supervisor Christie, I do know that this comes in the form of emergency assistance, and it's primarily rent and utility assistance payments. Whether it is part and parcel of the bigger EELS program, I cannot answer today. So this is a contract that, or an IGA that we've had. It's a 5-year IGA, and it's pass-through dollars that are coming from the Department of Economic Security. And then each year, as those various line item dollars are adjusted, we make an amendment, and that's what's being added to this particular contract. We'll have to confirm if it's somehow related to EEL's program. I'm just not familiar enough to be able to answer that today.
Well, that's going to affect how I vote, whether or not, so perhaps go ahead with the vote, proceed with the vote.
All right, the item, we moved and seconded this one. Okay. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed?
Item passes 3-1 with Supervisor Christie opposed. Any objections to taking 27 through 30 together? All right, I will move those 4 items.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Supervisor Grijalva. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Those 4 items pass 4-0. We'd already done item number 31, so let's move to item number 32. This is a hearing, rezoning ordinance number 2025-1. Is there anybody here to speak to this item? Right, if that is the case, I will move to close the hearing and approve ordinance number 2025-1.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Supervisor Grijalva. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Item passes 4-0, and I believe we are adjourned.
Yay. Thank you.
Thank you.